He is hanging from a tree, about to be sacrificed during the memorial ceremony for the Demon Emperor. The reason is simple: he is currently the weakest demon, sitting at the very bottom of the food chain. In a land where only the strong dominate, he works as nothing more than a farmer and is treated like a footstool by high-ranking demons with stronger, awakened bloodlines. Naturally, the demons gathered for the memorial are left completely shocked when what was supposed to be a solemn ceremony suddenly turns into a brutal massacre. This is because the strongest hero has been reincarnated into the body of this weak demon. Naturally, he is more than ready for round 2. And this time, he swears to wipe out the entire demon race. It all begins in the past. Gron was once an ordinary person who suddenly awakened a powerful skill that eventually made him the strongest human in the world. However, today, the hero party has finally defeated the Demon Emperor after a fierce battle, though they lose one of their members in the process. Normally, everything should have ended there, but unfortunately the Demon Emperor is not truly dead. He reveals his hidden ability to assimilate into the bodies of others, meaning the hero party and even the strongest man in history is about to become his vessel. Left with no other choice, Gron is forced by his teammates to kill them before crushing his own heart, ultimately taking the Demon Emperor down with him. 5 years have now passed since the battle and the death of the Demon Emperor. Every year, a grand memorial ceremony is held in his honor. The ceremony proceeds with the sacrifice of human captives alongside a demon. This particular demon has no name. He is the weakest and most worthless outcast in the entire demon race, so dying in the ceremony is considered the greatest honor he could ever receive. Just as he is about to be killed, he suddenly dodges the attack, but his arm is severed in the process. This leaves everyone conducting the ceremony in complete shock because it is obvious that the demon is no longer himself. The demon looks closely at him and becomes shocked. The supposed trash demon is none other than our protagonist, the strongest hero who killed the Demon Emperor 5 years ago. In the year 312, during the war against the demons, the demon army launches a land assault as a feint, while secretly preparing a surprise attack by sea. Their goal is to break through humanity's defenses from the ocean, and several demon commanders lead the charge. The narrative explains that the attack is so sudden that only one human is able to respond in time. That person is our protagonist, a man known by many titles: the honorary professor of the Royal Academy, the chief healer, and the mad demon slayer. Seeing the lone figure standing before them, the lead demon commander merely scoffs, believing this will be an easy battle. Moments later, we see that same mantis demon. It is the only survivor because a single slash from our protagonist doesn't just cleave the ocean, it cuts through the entire army at sea. 3 demon commanders die that day, and only one manages to escape. Now, back in the present, the mantis demon's head is torn from its body as our protagonist remarks that the joints are the weakest part of this species. After killing the demon, he realizes that he has reincarnated with his innate ability intact. So when the remaining demons charge at him all at once, Gron uses the mantis claw as his weapon. One slash is all it takes to wipe out more than half of the demons. His innate ability activates, and Gron complains inwardly that, unlike growing stronger simply by killing, his power only increases based on how strong his defeated enemies are. Nonetheless, one demon witnesses everything. A centipede demon immediately panics and tries to flee, but our protagonist stops it by driving the mantis claw into one of its body segments. While the demon writhes in agony, Gron covers the bodies of the human girls who were sacrificed with a piece of cloth. At the same time, he uses healing magic to restore his severed arm. The way it regenerates catches him off guard as snake-like appendages form before reshaping into a new arm. Gron then drops to his knees as the realization that he has been reincarnated as a demon finally sinks in. Naturally, this fills him with overwhelming rage. Meanwhile, the centipede demon calls him trash, continuing to mock and insult him. It believes our protagonist is still the same nameless weakling who was too pathetic to even deserve a name. However, the murderous aura radiating from Gron makes it obvious that things are no longer the same. Gron kills the demon, relieved that his powers still function in this body. With that confirmed, he decides to continue slaughtering demons. The next scene shifts to a mountain. As he travels, Gron decides that finding a safe place to stay should come first before investigating his current situation. He also recognizes the place as Skull Mountain, the very location where he once slew a giant demon. Ironically, it has now become a settlement for weaker demons. Around the mountain lies the area where the original owner of this body once lived, and our protagonist decides to use the hidden location as a temporary hideout. Later, Gron lights a campfire while reflecting on his former companions. He recalls one particular memory where he had to carry his entire party across a river of molten lava. By the end of the journey, his pants had been completely burned away. Meanwhile, his party members couldn't stop laughing because he was forced to wear a straw skirt for the remainder of the trip. Thinking back on those moments, our protagonist can't help but smile. As the fire crackles, he carves wooden figures of his companions. Once he finishes, he picks up the one modeled after his former self, quietly thinking that the outcome of his final battle might have been different if only he had been stronger. Still, Gron decides to proceed with his main plan of killing demons. Since he is now a demon himself, he can eliminate them from the inside. Speaking of which, the memories of his new host begin to return. As expected, he is the weakest demon in the entire demon race. Gron also learns that he is a snake blood-type demon and works as a farmer. In addition, he remembers that this demon even attends classes. Unfortunately, he is constantly bullied and treated like a stool by the other demons. Gron cannot understand what is happening. Normally, demons are simply tools of war used by the Demon King, yet in just 5 years, they have developed concepts like agriculture and even begun building a civilization. Gron concludes that if he is going to wipe out the demons this time, he will need to become twice as strong as he was in his previous life. The next scene takes us to the rookie training camp inside the giant remains, specifically training camp number 2. There, the same horned demon begins giving a lecture. Before continuing, he hopes everyone understands the current situation on the continent of Solus, because he has no intention of spending another half hour explaining the same thing. Meanwhile, our protagonist explains what he roughly understands. It turns out that after the death of the Demon King 5 years ago, the new ruler divided the continent into 5 courts, and the war against the humans has currently reached a stalemate. Nonetheless, the demon instructor moves on to the next topic, which is innate abilities. He explains that innate abilities are natural powers unique to each individual, and unlike humans, every demon possesses one. Regardless of whether someone is human or demon, using an innate ability consumes internal force. Furthermore, the strength of this force is measured with marks ranging from 1, the lowest, to 6, the highest. He admits there are marks beyond 6, but that is far beyond the scope of rookie demons. As a demonstration, he activates his internal force, revealing himself to be a 2-mark expert. He explains that for a 1-mark demon, reaching the 2nd mark requires an insane amount of training. Gron is currently a 1-mark demon. In addition, he possesses a snake-type bloodline, a lineage so rare that he knows almost nothing about it. Basically, if he wants to grow stronger, he must first understand the true nature of his bloodline. Anyways, the instructor also reveals that while a 1-mark demon can use all of their basic skills, reaching the 2nd mark is completely different. At that stage, they unlock something called authority, which allows them to use ultimate and special techniques. In the middle of the explanation, the demons begin making way as another demon walks in, intentionally bumping into our protagonist. The demon carries the heads of human soldiers as trophies. And the reason everyone fears him is because, despite being a rookie, he has already reached the 2nd mark and is considered a genius. And that is exactly why he can bully anyone he wants, especially our protagonist. Nonetheless, the instructor calls everyone's attention while telling our protagonist to get lost because things are about to become dangerous. This is because they are entering the combat portion of the lesson. The instructor begins explaining the principles of combat and the factors required for victory. These include tactics, skill, information, and even adaptability. The moment he mentions identifying an opponent's weaknesses, the blue demon immediately becomes excited. Anyways, the instructor finally reveals the specimen they will be studying. He explains that it is a demon created by the previous demon lord over 5 years ago. He calls it the Shrieking Demon, warning everyone that it is so powerful it could literally tear them all to shreds. With that warning, the lesson begins. Our protagonist takes this as his cue to leave, noting how boring the lesson is. There is no more useful information to gain, and he is only disappointed that he lacks the strength to kill every demon present. For that reason, he leaves in frustration. But at that very moment, the Shrieking Demon's eyes suddenly snap open. It immediately charges toward the demons. The instructor quickly restrains it. I almost forgot to mention that this particular demon is said to be dumb and unable to distinguish between allies and enemies. Despite being a 3-mark demon, its weakness is actually the chain around its neck. Suddenly, the Shrieking Demon smirks. With a sneer, it mocks the instructor for believing it was an idiot. It turns out it had been pretending the entire time. Its mission was to act like a mindless beast and infiltrate this royal court. Now that its mission is complete, it decides this is the perfect opportunity to wipe out every rookie present. Just like that, It effortlessly breaks the collar around its neck and immediately kills the instructor. With nothing left to restrain it, the shrieking demon goes berserk, slaughtering rookies one after another. Seeing this, the second mark demon, who was hailed as a genius, immediately bolts for the exit. In his panic, he doesn't even watch where he is going and crashes straight into our protagonist. He falls flat like a piece of trash, but our protagonist doesn't spare the fool a single glance. At that exact moment, the shrieking demon locks onto our protagonist as its next target. Watching the monster charge directly toward them, the second mark demon wonders whether our protagonist is finally going to reveal his secret weapon. At the same time, the shrieking demon lunges at him. Gron simply turns around and shoots the monster a cold stare. The demon instantly freezes in place. It cannot understand why such a weak demon is not afraid of it. For a brief moment, it feels as though this demon knows its weakness, something only someone who had fought it before should know. Since that is impossible, the demon convinces itself that our protagonist is merely bluffing. With that, Gron dares it to take one more step, if it wishes to die. Our protagonist's words enrage the shrieking demon, and it decides to unleash its full power. In the next moment, a pair of wings suddenly emerges from its back. Our protagonist remains completely unfazed, but instead of attacking, the demon chooses to leave. This is because it considers killing our protagonist a waste of time. For all it knows, someone even stronger could be waiting nearby. That is why it decides to escape. Once it is gone, Grun stretches out his hand toward the so-called genius. The guy immediately refuses to take it. Unfortunately, he completely misunderstands Gron's intention, because our protagonist simply grabs his clothes and rips them off. The genius demon is left stunned as Gron completely ignores him and uses the torn clothes to wipe the bloodstains off himself. Naturally, the guy becomes furious over such humiliation. Meanwhile, the rest of the demons instinctively make way for our protagonist, which is only natural considering he is the only one who dared confront the shrieking demon. Just then, a green-skinned demon demands to know how he pulled it off if he values his life. When our protagonist explains, the demons are left completely shocked. It turns out Gron claims that he simply followed the tactics described in the Demon Tactical Manual, a book supposedly written by his previous self. Of course, Gron is lying. He knows that standing their ground wouldn't make the shrieking demon hesitate. So anyone foolish enough to believe his explanation is completely cooked. Anyways, the second mark genius demon grows increasingly annoyed by all the attention our protagonist is receiving. At the same time, his subordinates ask if he is all right, but he dismisses their concerns. Instead, he reminds them how they always bragged about their ultimate techniques. In other words, he wants them to get rid of our protagonist once and for all. In the next scene, the group sets up an ambush. The moment one of them spots our protagonist, a fat demon begins releasing a thick mist from its stomach. The fog is meant to prevent anyone from interfering. However, our protagonist is already one step ahead. Using the abilities of his ancient snake bloodline, he targets the fat demon. In the next instant, the demon's body begins to swell uncontrollably before eventually exploding from Gron's venom. The poisonous mist quickly spreads throughout the area. Next, Gron advances while using another ability of the ancient serpent bloodline. By channeling his internal force into his eyes, he gains thermal vision. When he channels the same force into his arms, they transform into snake-like appendages capable of striking his enemies with incredible speed. Eventually, the remaining demons notice their fallen comrade. One of them activates his skill and slices through the poisonous mist. He and his remaining companion mock our protagonist, believing that without the poisonous fog, he is completely helpless. The red demon even begins showing off. Our protagonist simply stares at the fool with a blank expression. Then, in the blink of an eye, he ends the demon's life. The remaining demon, who had been cheering moments earlier, freezes on the spot and begins sweating profusely in utter shock. Without hesitation, he drops to his knees and desperately begs for his life. Our protagonist calmly asks why he should spare him. The terrified demon quickly reveals that he knows where the second mark genius keeps his valuable treasure. Gron considers the offer. He explains that if he wishes to reach the second mark of his ancient snake bloodline, he must undergo a serpent molt. Essentially, he must sacrifice a rare treasure to himself in order to shed his skin, molt, and evolve. Just like that, our protagonist follows the terrified demon to the treasure's location. Soon, they arrive at a waterfall. The demon points toward it and claims that the treasure is hidden directly behind the falling water. But in the very next second, our protagonist grabs the demon by the neck. He uses him as a human shield because he naturally suspects the place is protected by traps. Just as expected, the trap is triggered. Once everything settles down, our protagonist casually discards the demon's lifeless body before heading inside. Meanwhile, back at Mount Round, inside the giant skull, a demon soldier reports the recent training camp incident to their leader. After hearing the part about our protagonist, she immediately finds him rather interesting. She is Bonebreaker, the leader of Mount Round. The next scene takes us back to the cave. There, our protagonist discovers a small box. Confused, he wonders if this is really the treasure. Before he can inspect it any further, the second marked demon suddenly appears and snatches the contents of the box. He immediately attempts to kick our protagonist. However, Gron swiftly dodges before driving his knee into the demon's leg. The guy grits his teeth in pain. Although Gron has already killed all of his subordinates, the genius realizes that now is not the time to fight. The cave's narrow terrain does not favor him. For now, he decides to retreat. As our protagonist watches him flee, he realizes the second marked demon is actually a bird-type demon. For some reason, Gron seems to hate this species of demon with a passion. Without the slightest hesitation, our protagonist jumps after him. The fleeing demon is left completely stunned because he never expected our protagonist to pursue him so relentlessly. Next, our protagonist grabs the bird demon by the neck midair, causing him to lose control of his flight. Meanwhile, he continues assaulting the demon relentlessly. Having had enough, the bird demon twists his body and kicks our protagonist toward the lake below. Gron manages to land safely. However, the bird demon smugly remarks that it's unfortunate our protagonist landed in Gallbladder Lake. The lake is infested with Mount Round bile worms. These creatures feast on blood and flesh. With a cold smile, the bird demon declares that he will enjoy watching our protagonist get devoured. Our protagonist ignores his remarks. Instead, he begins slaughtering the worms one after another, making the bird genius question reality. Even so, the demon continues mocking him, believing our protagonist only became this strong because he had spent all his life shoveling dirt. At that moment, our protagonist channels his internal force into his arm and wipes out several bile worms with a single strike. Unfortunately, he still can't reach the bird genius demon. Now the demon becomes even more arrogant, calling our protagonist slow. He believes our protagonist can't keep this up for long and will eventually be worn down by the endless swarm of worms. Unfortunately for him, Gron only continues growing stronger. Thanks to his innate corpse ability, his strength keeps increasing. Now the bird demon is left stunned, unable to understand how our protagonist is becoming so powerful so quickly. Meanwhile, our protagonist completely wipes out every worm in the lake. As a result, his innate corpse ability evolves to Mark II. With a cold expression, he declares that he will take the bird demon's head with his very next strike. The demon is caught off guard, but still believes our protagonist is talking nonsense. In response, our protagonist charges straight at him. Meanwhile, the demon draws his weapon, warning our protagonist not to underestimate him. The weapon turns out to have once belonged to a demon commander. The moment the attack is launched, Gron's body reacts instinctively. The snakes on his body begin wrapping themselves around the arrow. Just like that, our protagonist falls back into the lake. The bird demon is equally confused, wondering what just happened and whether he somehow managed to kill our protagonist. At that moment, his sister rushes over while calling out to him. Seeing her concern, he proudly explains that he was simply dealing with a troublesome opponent and assures her that he is fine. He then hands her something he took from our protagonist. He explains that it can be used to treat her eyes, adding that he will do anything to protect his big sister. Meanwhile, our protagonist remains deep beneath the lake. Eventually, he realizes that the arrow is the Thunderbolt, a weapon that once belonged to the previous Demon King. Even so, he doesn't understand why his body is reacting to it this way. But at that moment, something unexpected happens. His consciousness is suddenly pulled into a different dimension. He takes a moment to process what is happening before concluding that he is currently undergoing his moltening. This causes his ancient snake bloodline to begin awakening. Meanwhile, the bird siblings continue waiting. Since no bubbles rise from the lake, the two genius demons conclude that our protagonist must have died. His sister quietly tends to his injuries. Suddenly, rain begins to fall. Moments later, a violent storm appears out of nowhere. As the storm clouds flash with purple lightning, the bird demon immediately recognizes them as savage dark thunder. The very same lightning suddenly erupts from within the lake. The demon quickly shields his big sister from the water splashing into the air. However, she points toward the lake with a worried expression. Something just came out of the water. She points toward the center of the lake. The bird demon can't believe what he is seeing. Standing atop a massive statue is our protagonist, now in his Mark II form. The 2 Mark form is called the Fierce Thunder form, and Gron comments on how the siblings keep waiting for death. In response, the 2 Mark bird demon suddenly shoots forward like lightning while cursing at our protagonist. Unfortunately for him, our protagonist is far faster in this form. The demon doesn't even realize when Gron rips off one of his wings. Enraged, he immediately attacks our protagonist from behind. Once again, Gron tears off the remaining wing. Looking down at the demon, he silently thinks that the guy is far too weak to even let him test his full strength. With that, he sends the demon flying. His big sister sees this and immediately rushes toward him. The 2 Mark bird demon can only curse his own bad luck, wishing he were stronger. However, he knows that if he dies now, our protagonist will definitely not spare his sister. The guy suddenly turns into Goku as power surges from his body. Our protagonist merely smirks with interest upon seeing this. The bird demon has awakened his second form in authority, just like Gron. Normally, the sister would be in tears, seeing her little brother grow stronger just to protect her. As a result, she decides not to become a burden and instead fight alongside him. With that, she activates her own authority, summoning an eye beast. Next, both siblings combine their special moves. Gron simply crouches down before launching himself forward. He effortlessly maneuvers past the brother's attack and follows up with a powerful kick to the bird demon's face. The guy is sent crashing into a wall, creating a massive crater. Meanwhile, his sister controls her summoned beast to attack our protagonist from behind. In response, Gron channels his internal force into his arms and destroys the beast with his serpent strike. Her brother sees this as his chance and shoots forward like a lightning bolt. At the same time, his sister casts a buff skill on him. Both siblings aim to finish our protagonist with this single strike. Forced onto the defensive, the bird demon laughs, convinced that this attack will shatter any defense. In response, our protagonist admits that the siblings are worthy opponents. Unfortunately, this is also the moment he decides to destroy them. It turns out he was never planning to defend himself. What appeared to be a defensive stance was actually a counterattack. Anyway, the brother falls to the ground and desperately begs his sister to take the pouch and run. That's when our protagonist steps on his arm, revealing what is inside the pouch. It contains human eyes. Because of this, the bird demon explains that his sister suffers from a condition that requires human eyes, or she will eventually go blind. This leads Gron to ask why they never sought out a healer instead. However, the demon sister simply begs him to leave them alone. She even tells him that he can take the eyes for himself. Hearing her plead for mercy, Gron decides to ask them a question instead. Both siblings are stunned when he asks whether those humans begged for mercy while their eyes were being gouged out. Hearing this, the siblings exchange glances. Before long, the bird demon's sister quietly admits that she can't remember. Gron expected that answer. Although he admits that demons have developed civilization, they are still demons. That means they will continue harming others for their own selfish gain. In addition, he isn't yet accustomed to using his fierce thunder form since it consumes a tremendous amount of his internal force. Later, 2 demons investigate the bodies of the siblings. After examining the scene, they conclude and report to their leader that the lightning from the sky was not what killed them. Bonebreaker studies the bodies and notes that both of their heads were blown off by lightning. She further concludes that this can only mean one thing. Someone unwelcome has entered her territory. Later, while heading back, she informs her subordinate that any strange death involving a genius must be personally inspected by her. At that very moment, she spots our protagonist wearing Luffy's straw hat. This immediately catches her attention, so she approaches him and asks what he is doing. Our protagonist honestly replies that he is looking for good fruit to plant. His answer reminds her that he is the farmer she heard about, the one who scared away the shrieking demon. Without warning, our protagonist is pushed to the ground as she tells him she has a special request. She explains that she has been craving good fruit and warns him that he had better find some for her if he values his life. After saying that, she leaves with her subordinates. On the other hand, Gron uses this encounter as a chance to gauge her strength and discovers that she is apparently at the 4th mark. From his observation, she is a defense-type demon, which is a direct counter to him. A speed-type demon. However, he has the advantage against strength-type demons who happen to counter defense types. Anyway, he can't engage her now because he doesn't have enough offensive skills. Not to mention she is a 4 mark. The matchup isn't just against his favor, it's completely hopeless. However, for some reason, he can't resist the urge to kill her and grow stronger. According to him, the hunt has just begun. Meanwhile, the Queen of Gooners is busy searching for clues that will help find our protagonist. After going through countless books, she still can't find any clues. As for our protagonist, he explains that this hunt requires patience. He needs to find a way to increase his innate abilities so he can kill her before she even has a chance to react. The next scene skips ahead, showing a caravan. The demons in charge of the caravan are obviously hiding something from their leader, Bonebreaker. Gron just happens to be there and spots the hidden location. Since it is so well concealed, he concludes that it is the perfect place for him to increase his level. Inside the hidden location is a cave where a demon stands guard. The demon stops our protagonist, telling him that he needs a token before he can enter. Behind the door turns out to be a black market. Gron simply enters after killing the guard at the entrance. As he walks through the market, he listens to the conversations around him. He learns that for the past 2 years, their leader, Bonebreaker, has suddenly stopped trading humans and human body parts. Those items are now treated as contraband, and any demon found possessing them is executed immediately. Gron listens carefully, thinking the female demon may be planning something by enforcing all these changes. Just then, the demon from earlier enters, announcing that he has brought in new stock: humans. Some of the demons complain because a few of the humans have lost their eyes. So the demon explains that it was the handiwork of a 2-mark demon. Aside from that, they are all intact. Hearing this, Gron tells the slave trader that he will buy every one of them. The demon simply looks at our protagonist and assumes he is broke. That's when our protagonist reveals that he has fierce thunder arrows. Naturally, the demon slave trader becomes interested and tells his business partner to wait while he discusses business with our protagonist in private. As our protagonist leaves with the slave merchant, he notices how poorly the human slaves are being treated, which comes as no surprise since they were captured by demons. The slave merchant's companion sighs inwardly because he had been planning to use some of the human slaves for his next meal. Unlike his companion, the slave merchant is eager to talk business. The moment the door to the black market shuts, the entire place falls silent. Moments later, Gron emerges from the black market. Obviously, he has wiped out every trader and demon inside. Meanwhile, the slave merchant's companion has no idea what has happened. He is busy making threats when Gron suddenly appears before him. A single strike from Gron instantly erases the demon. Seeing this, Gron thinks to himself that he can no longer be called weak. He also notices that the corpse mark tattoo has now completed a full circle around his neck. Meanwhile, the little blonde-haired girl is absolutely terrified. In her eyes, our protagonist is the demon among demons. Gron pays no attention to her. At the same time, his corpse ability increases by 1 level. Every time he kills, he gains a mark, and once the mark completes a full rotation, it evolves into a single mark. Now turning his attention to the human slaves, Gron begins by returning something one of them had dropped earlier. Of course, the boy thanks him. With that, the protagonist tells them to follow him. When the blonde-haired girl asks why he won't lead them, he simply refuses. Just like that, they are taken to his hideout. There, he heals the human slaves, restoring their eyesight. Naturally, the group thanks him, but our protagonist tells them to keep quiet. Still, the blonde-haired girl wants to know why he saved them. His response leaves her completely confused. So Gron repeats himself, saying that he did it simply because he wanted to, then once again tells the girl to be quiet. After completely healing them, Gron decides to think of a way to send them back. But after thinking for a while, the mood becomes painfully awkward. The little blonde girl notices it as well. As a result, she comes up with an idea. She decides to tell a joke to lighten the mood. With that, she makes a dad joke, hoping someone will guess the punchline. However, no one, including me, understands what she's even saying. The disappointment is clearly written across her face. But at that moment, only our protagonist lets out a small chuckle. The group finds Gron to be a really peculiar demon, and his sense of humor is clearly a bit off. However, as the little girl runs toward him because he's the only one who understands her, Gron suddenly uses his snake-like appendages to wrap around her. Not just her, he attacks everyone with his serpent strike. As they struggle, our protagonist calls them naive. He reminds them that demons should never be trusted. As they slowly lose consciousness, he tells them to experience a painful death and remember never to trust a demon again in the future. And just like that, the group collapses unconscious. All except the little girl, who remains standing. meeting our protagonist's cold, murderous stare. The little one is desperately scared, but she points out that our protagonist doesn't actually plan on killing them. When he doesn't reply, she questions his suspicious words. If he truly wanted to kill them, why would he tell them not to trust demons in the future? She firmly believes Gron is a good demon and simply doesn't want them to lower their guard and trust other demons in the future. Meanwhile, while the rest remain asleep, our protagonist wonders what to do with her. She insists on following him, but Gron doesn't want dead weight. She replies with the most adorable expression, introducing herself as Sura, a swordsmith, before asking for Gron's name. Our protagonist is surprised to hear this and asks if that means she is the granddaughter of Elysius. This causes Sura to ask how he knows her grandfather. In response, our protagonist scratches his head and explains that he is an old acquaintance. And just like that, our protagonist experiences a flashback. It turns out Sura's grandfather was also a blacksmith. During their first meeting, the old man refuses to forge a sword for Gron. Thanks to his unique skill, the man can literally smell the blood of both the guilty and the innocent on our protagonist's hands, so he refuses to forge a sword for someone like him. That is when our protagonist reveals that he was actually sent by someone called Sister Dea of the Mercy Order. Let's just call them the Church, anyway. Gron wants the old man to forge an unprecedented heavenly steel greatsword. As a result, the old man quietly stares at our protagonist's younger self. In the end, he only agrees because he knows Sister Dea and he owes her a favor. Gron also has one more request. Sister Dea wants the sword to bear the statue of the God of Mercy. When Gron asks when he can return to collect the sword, the old man simply tells him that a weapon of that caliber will take time to forge. Not to mention, he can't start right away because his daughter-in-law is about to give birth, so he needs to go see his grandchild first. The timeline skips forward. By the time our protagonist returns, he finds the old man sitting outside his ruined workshop. Gron approaches him, holding a baby, and asks about his sword. Elysius replies by pointing toward the sword resting at the doorway. He tells our protagonist that the sword's name is Sura, and he named it after his granddaughter. This causes Gron to grow curious about her parents. The old man sadly explains that they were caught in a demon horde, and everyone died. Gron's expression darkens upon hearing that demons were responsible. Seeing his reaction, the old man assumes he has encountered them before. Gron nods, stating that he is going to kill every last one of them. Just then, Elysius hands him baby Sura, explaining that he never got the chance to give her a proper birth blessing. Because of that, our protagonist decides to do it himself, wishing her a life free from pain. He also hopes that the same name will follow him throughout the great massacre of demons. With that, Gron gently hands baby Sura back, because that very same demon horde suddenly appears out of nowhere. He charges forward while reflecting on the meaning of mercy and justice. According to him, before evil can descend upon the innocent, he will continue slaughtering demons until none of them remain. The next chapter opens with Sura realizing that our protagonist is the one her grandpa always tells her about. Curious, she asks why her uncle Gron is a demon now and why he looks so much younger. Our protagonist doesn't bother explaining his reincarnation. Instead, he simply tells her it's a long story before showing more interest in learning how she was captured. Sura replies with the same answer, saying it's a long story as well. However, she explains that she can't return to her grandpa until she forges the strongest demon-slaying blade. She becomes excited when our protagonist believes in her and encourages her to work hard. While writing something down, he adds that he genuinely envies her because she has a goal. Later, the same note is placed in a grassy plain. It reads that they were saved by the Vampire Knight and gives them specific instructions to head to the Yalivia Kingdom. The message is addressed to the slaves Gron saved, and one of them points out that they were rescued by the Vampire Knight, who turns out to be Gron's student from the Royal Academy. As for our protagonist, he returns to the hideout while wondering if he has secured enough materials for Sura to build a forge. In response, Sura proudly shows off her creation, saying it is more than enough. However, they soon face another problem. She explains that they still need materials to forge our protagonist's sword. The top-grade heavenly steel required for the weapon is currently under the demon's control. Before she can finish speaking, our protagonist reveals pieces of heavenly steel. It turns out he managed to obtain it from a trader at the black market in the previous chapter. Upon hearing this, Sura jokes that her uncle must be quite the opportunistic thief. She then reveals that she knows the heavenly steel forging method. When our protagonist asks about it, she explains that only 3 people in the world know this forging technique. Those 3 are herself, her grandpa, and the current Demon King, Agricola. Becoming thoughtful, Sura found it strange that despite knowing this forging method and possessing a heavenly steel vein, the Demon King only forged weapons for himself instead of supplying his army, a choice that was honestly baffling. Our protagonist decides to leave. When Sura asks where he is going, he simply tells her that he needs to hunt. Meanwhile, the next scene takes us to Bonebreaker's private hot spring. Her subordinate has just finished reporting the recent incident and the discovery of the black market. Feeling exhausted by the report, she calmly orders them to hang the corpses of the lawbreakers as a warning for the other demons to see. With that, she dismisses her subordinate while instructing another demon to prepare a proper breakfast for the following day. The Queen of Gooners then thinks to herself that she would give anything for some sweet supplements. Meanwhile, at one of the demon camps, several demons discuss the chain of recent incidents. It turns out someone has been hunting demons, and they suspect the culprit is a group of 2 or 3 marked demons causing trouble. Of course, this is only possible because our protagonist has found a way to conceal his second mark. That's how he is able to secretly hunt demons without raising suspicion. In simple words, our protagonist is hiding in plain sight. While walking alone down the street, our protagonist suddenly stops because he senses someone tailing him. He jokingly wonders why anyone would follow a poor farmer like him and asks if they plan to rob him. The person following him finally steps out from an alley. Without warning, the figure lunges at our protagonist. He dodges the attack and responds with a punch to the figure's gut. Unfortunately, his fist immediately shattered upon impact. Realizing how tough his opponent is, he quickly creates some distance and notes that the demon possesses incredibly high defense. After planning his next move, our protagonist kicks a nearby beam. The demon is briefly distracted, and our protagonist instantly launches himself at her. Seeing this, the demon smiles before calling him a bastard. She grabs his arm and admits that she had overestimated him. However, the moment she does, our protagonist retaliates by unleashing his purple snake lightning. In response, the demon activates a defensive skill that sends our protagonist flying. He never expected the demon to be able to boost her defense enough to withstand his attack. As a result, our protagonist patiently waits for the perfect opportunity. The instant a piece of cloth obstructs the demon's vision, our protagonist vanishes as if he had gone to get milk. Only then is her identity revealed. She never expected a one-mark demon to be this dangerous. She decides that the next time she catches him, she will either make him her dog or simply get rid of him. Meanwhile, our protagonist returns to his hideout while reflecting on his fight with Bonebreaker. He concludes that if he wants to defeat her, he will need to further evolve his bloodline and wield a proper weapon. Suddenly, thick smoke begins pouring out from inside the hideout. Our protagonist immediately calls out to Sura. He is left speechless as she explains that she accidentally forgot to install an exhaust vent to let the smoke escape. Before he can say anything else, she rushes back to the forge. It seems she is almost finished crafting our protagonist's weapon. Gron quietly watches her as she works. She reveals that she has forged a sword specifically tailored to his current strength, unlike the massive greatsword he once wielded. Shura's eyes glow with excitement as she presents the 7th heavenly steel sword to be forged. She tells our protagonist to watch closely as she creates it. The sword has a unique shape unlike any ordinary blade. Gron examines the sword and Sura lights up when he remarks that he likes its design. Still, he points out that the sword is unfinished. Sura nods, explaining that she didn't have enough materials to forge the guard hilt and pommel. Nonetheless, our protagonist believes this much is already impressive. When Gron asks if she has chosen a name for the sword, Sura proudly calls it Little Sura, which is honestly quite funny, and our protagonist can't help but like the name. As expected of a heavenly steel sword, his snake bloodline immediately begins to show signs of molten. However, Gron decides that now is not the right time since the sword is still incomplete. He will only begin the process once it is fully finished. Of course, Sura promises to do her best. Just like that, the two begin discussing his former signature techniques as the Mad Demon Slayer. The next scene takes us to the following morning. The little one slowly wakes up to the delicious smell of food. When she opens her eyes, she is stunned. She immediately asks our protagonist how he managed to make it, to which he replies that he learned a lot during his time at the Royal Academy. Anyways, the meal is specially prepared for the Bonebreaker. Because of this, our protagonist is allowed by the guards to enter her quarters. As soon as he walks in, the two lock eyes for a brief moment in silence. She is the first to break it, noting that our protagonist is making quite a good impression, and that it was very thoughtful of him to deliver the meal personally. Meanwhile, Gron simply ignores her flattery. The moment she lets her guard down, he immediately makes his move while activating his second form. Unfortunately, his attack doesn't connect, and she is taken aback to see him wielding a heavenly steel sword. Gron immediately follows up with another strike, believing she won't be so lucky this time. In response, she finally activates her innate ability, Ibios Armor, using it to block Gron's attack. Our protagonist already expected this from a defensive-type demon. The Queen of Gunners sighs, wondering if that is all our protagonist has to offer, adding that she is disappointed. Our protagonist fires back with a few jabs of his own, and just like that, the battle resumes. Mid-fight, the Bonebreaker suddenly smiles. Using her innate ability, she transforms her shield into a lance. Gron spots the incoming attack and dodges at the very last second. He immediately counters, but she reacts just as quickly, transforming the lance back into a shield to block the strike. Even so, the impact forces her backward. In her mind, she concludes that our protagonist doesn't know how to resonate with his sword, as he is relying solely on brute force. She believes he won't last much longer. Surprisingly, Gron is thinking the same thing. He considers forcing her to switch weapons, but he soon comes up with a better idea. Activating his snake purple lightning, he unleashes an area of effect technique called Phantom Lightning Net. In response, she scoffs before using her mark power to create a protective barrier against the lightning. Gron narrows his eyes at the sight. This is a technique created by his former comrade, Faye, who developed it specifically to counter lightning demons. He has no idea how this female demon managed to steal the technique, but it doesn't matter. She isn't Faye. In that very instant, she switches her weapon. Just like that, our protagonist is struck. At the same time, his second form deactivates. Seeing this, she mocks him, finding it pathetic that someone like Gron thought he could assassinate her. Unfortunately for her, Gron intentionally allowed himself to be hit. At that very moment, the heavenly steel sword begins to resonate with him. Despite witnessing this, she continues mocking him. However, Gron calmly tells her that he was merely warming up. Now, the real fight has begun. Gron moves in for the kill, while Bonebreaker realizes a bit too late that she doesn't have enough time to switch weapons. When the strike lands, our protagonist is caught by surprise as she bites down on his sword instead. While holding him in place, she activates her innate ability once again, forming a massive gauntlet. The blow lands squarely on our protagonist's chest. Just like that, he is sent flying. Seeing that he is injured, she has no intention of giving him time to recover. Gron uses a joint lock simply to buy himself some time, while she finds the tactic rather interesting. She comments that our protagonist is definitely an experienced and skilled fighter, and she doesn't mind being entertained. Now it's her turn to put our protagonist in a hold. She believes it would be a waste to kill him. Instead, she offers to let him go in exchange for serving under her. When he doesn't reply and instead reaches for his sword, she takes it as him rejecting her offer. Naturally, she decides to kill him for real this time. Gron is punched so hard that he is sent flying, crashing through several floors of the building. He even tears another hole through the skull of the very giant he killed in his previous life. Meanwhile, Bonebreaker looks over the wreckage and believes there is no way our protagonist could have survived that attack. Unfortunately for her, she has greatly underestimated our boy. He not only heals himself, but also comes crashing back down faster than lightning. The female demon grows furious and meets his attack, head-on with her massive gauntlet. The impact shakes the entire stronghold. Once the smoke begins to clear, our protagonist is still standing. Unfortunately for him, the demon is still alive. She remarks that in her 2 years as a demon, he is the first opponent who has forced her to use this move. The technique she refers to is the talent mark, underlying battle banner. This skill absorbs incoming damage and converts it into attack power. Throughout her explanation, Gron pieces together her remarks and reflects on the fight. Then he finally realizes something, so when she charges at him again, he doesn't react. Instead, he calmly calls her Faye, his old comrade. The name alone causes her to freeze in the middle of her attack. Deactivating her skill, she gives our protagonist a suspicious stare. Seeing this, our protagonist shows her the mark on his neck. Just like that, we are taken back to the past, where Faya remembers her first encounter with our protagonist. The hero party is on their way to meet him when Faya's junior sister suddenly notices something strange. She wonders aloud why a mountain has such a perfectly round shape. It soon becomes clear that it isn't a mountain at all. Rather, it is the giant mountain troll demon. The demon keeps screaming as though something is terribly wrong inside it. When one of them asks why the top of the giant's head is so pointy, the holy knight Merovec tells them that it is the first form of the Skyfall sword technique. Coincidentally, that is the very same sword technique Gron used while descending during his fight with Faya. Anyways, this is also how he kills the giant. The group's priest manages to put up a protective barrier just in time. The entire party watches in stunned amazement as Gron effortlessly forces open the troll's mouth from the inside while covered in blood. When he asks why the Holy Knight brought 3 extra people who were not mentioned in the letter, Merovec steps forward and explains that he shouldn't be annoyed. After all, their group is going to kill the Demon Emperor. Hearing this, Gron insists that they draw clear boundaries. As he walks away, he also warns Merovec that deep affection will only become a burden or a hidden danger. Faya's very first discussion with our protagonist ends in a disagreement. However, our protagonist doesn't care about her opinion. As he leaves, Merovec asks everyone to forgive him, explaining that our protagonist is simply difficult and will eventually come around. Meanwhile, Faya says they should respect his principles. She adds that she believes she and our protagonist will never become friends. Back in the present, she asks if it is really him. Gron simply smiles in response. Their fight turns into an unexpected reunion. Our protagonist is taken by surprise as she suddenly hugs him in a way that anyone could easily misunderstand. When he notices her crying, he jokes about it. Through her tears, she simply tells him that she is happy to be reunited with her old comrade. Gron is about to say something when Faya's subordinates suddenly enter to check on her. Of course, they freeze in confusion after seeing the two in such a position. As a result, they conclude that the best thing to do is quietly leave while chatting about the sudden commotion. However, when one of them becomes curious about what is really happening inside, the other warns him not to listen to things he shouldn't. Inside, our protagonist tends to her injuries. She studies him for a moment before suddenly asking if he perhaps feels guilty about what happened in their previous life. Then she tells our protagonist to stop nagging, leaving him surprised, as she explains that he can be a bit talkative sometimes. Right after saying that, she starts crying like a little girl, complaining that her injuries hurt. Later, the two begin eating, and during their conversation, our protagonist learns that both Faya and her junior sister have reincarnated. Hearing this, our protagonist glances at her assets and asks the obvious question. He wants to know how she reincarnated into a female demon. In response, Faya pauses before looking at him as though he has said something incredibly stupid. That is because she has always been a woman. Our protagonist nearly chokes after hearing that. Seeing his expression, anyone can tell he had absolutely no idea. This leaves the baddie somewhat upset, considering they spent 2 years as teammates and he believed she was a man the entire time. Now our protagonist starts thinking back, and honestly, who could blame him? She always wore thick armor. He finally understands why she used to complain about her injuries, while explaining that the armor was the reason. Even more shocking, everyone except our protagonist already knew she was a woman. The two then head toward his hideout. Along the way, he asks why Faya never told him. She replies that she thought he already knew. To prove her point, she asks whether he never heard her little sister calling her JJ, which means big sister. Our protagonist simply replies that he thought it was some kind of formal military title. When Faye sees Yura, Gron explains that she is Alicius's granddaughter and the one who forged his current sword. She then shifts her attention to the wooden figures he carved. After taking a closer look, she notices that one of them is missing. Her eyes soon land on our protagonist's figure resting beside the campfire. Picking it up, she asks why he hates himself. He replies that it is simply a warning to himself, promising that this time he will completely uproot evil and never fail again. She chuckles, finding his determination amusing. Faye reminds him that they are a team, meaning he can count on her to help smash evil, though it would be better to see our protagonist smash something else. Anyways, the next scene takes place outside the cave, where Gron learns that after her reincarnation 2 years ago, Faye has been secretly hunting genius and rising demons. She nods, admitting that ruling this place is far from easy, since some demons are already plotting to overthrow her. In the end, both of them agree that the cruel nature of demons makes them difficult to control regardless of the generation. While on the topic, Faye explains that demons have evolved to possess emotions while still retaining their murderous instincts. Perhaps that is why she occasionally loses herself. Our protagonist agrees, noting that he has also been affected by the same phenomenon, although in a slightly different way. When Faye asks what he means by different, Gron explains that his mind and personality have become much calmer, and he has grown less creative when it comes to killing his enemies. From her expression, it is obvious that this is not what she meant. She is referring to something entirely different, but chooses not to say it. Anyways, their conversation is interrupted by Sura, who is only half awake, as she asks our protagonist about Faye. Faye immediately finds the little girl absolutely adorable. She decides to change Sura's clothes while our protagonist explains to the confused girl that Faye was his comrade in his previous life. Meanwhile, Faye insists that they pack up and move to her basement since it is much better hidden and far more secure. At the entrance leading underground basement, Faye explains that only she and Faya know about the hidden entrance. When Gron asks about Faya, she explains that she is currently in the realm of silence because of her physical condition. Once inside the basement, Gron realizes that she has not been idle during the past 2 years. Instead, she has been gathering information the entire time. Our protagonist's thoughts are suddenly interrupted when he notices Sura's new outfit. The little girl innocently wonders if she can wear it while forging, leaving him completely stunned. Meanwhile, Faye finds her even cuter and frantically begins searching for a matching hair accessory. While sorting through the items, something catches our protagonist's eye. He immediately recognizes the blue seashell as the call of the Soul Sea. Confused, Faye asks if there is anything special about it. Gron explains that he first came across it while working as a professor at the Royal Academy. He further explains that the shell allows someone to enter another person's soul and observe their memories and past. Saying this gives Gron an idea. With the shell, they might finally discover why they reincarnated. Hearing his reasoning, Faye agrees and decides they should begin the process. However, she is left speechless when our protagonist points out that half of the shell is missing. Now Gron is slightly annoyed because she claims she has no idea where the other half went. It is now our protagonist's turn to be speechless, as she explains that it was stolen by a group of bandit demons from an unclaimed territory. She further adds that they were extremely difficult to track down, which is why she eventually gave up searching for them. Hearing her excuse, Gron remembers something he wanted to mention earlier. Faye pretends not to listen, as Gron points out that her concealment technique is still lacking despite everything he taught her. He further adds that if any demon were smart enough, they would have already figured out that she was the one hunting geniuses. When she tries to brush it off by saying she will work harder in the future, Gron immediately tells her to stop making excuses. The next scene takes us to a camp. The group gathered there turns out to be the very same raiders from the unclaimed territory. Their leader sits inside a tent while his mistress confidently remarks that, given enough time, they will gather enough resources and strength to reclaim their territory and kill the evil dragon. Meanwhile, the raiders return with another shipment of supplies stolen from Mount Round territory. The moment they drop the cargo onto the ground and the coast is finally clear, the supply boxes suddenly grow legs. It immediately becomes obvious that our protagonist and Faye are hiding inside the boxes, using them to infiltrate the camp. The two quietly prepare their plan while the raiders continue discussing their recent raids and their preparations for fighting the evil dragon. At that moment, one massive demon walks over and is about to use one of the boxes as a stool. The instant he sits down, his enormous weight completely crushes the box. The entire group is left confused, as they wonder how the supply box they had just carried suddenly became empty. The answer is simple. Our protagonist transforms into a snake, using the ability to slip away unnoticed. And once again, the artist clearly knows exactly what the readers want. Not long after, Gron spots the leader of the raiders. The demon steps out of the tent alongside his mistress. Sure enough, he is carrying the other half of the blue shell, and the two begin discussing exchanging some items for weapons at the black market. As our protagonist quietly approaches in his snake form, the demon mistress informs him about the recent destruction of the black market. Just as the demon is about to ask who was responsible, Gron suddenly transforms back into his original form right behind him. Ignoring their stunned reactions, he gives Faye the signal to kill. Just like that, she bursts out of the supply box. As she cuts through the raiders, she vents her frustration, complaining that they stole all the good food and left only scraps behind. The remaining raiders immediately charge at her with their weapons drawn. In response to the threat, their leader does something completely unexpected. Normally, anyone would expect him to fight our protagonist to the death. Instead, to everyone's shock, the demon turns out to be a complete coward and a captive. Apparently, he is nothing more than the female demon's plaything for nighttime entertainment, meaning she is the true leader of the raiders. Because of this, the poor orc is killed by her without hesitation. She calls him pathetic trash, admitting she had already grown bored of playing with him anyway. Turning to our protagonist, whom she calls handsome, since he obviously wants the bag, she makes him an offer. If he can snatch the bag from her, she will make him her new man and satisfy him so completely that he will forget Big Cow Faye within minutes. In response, Gron activates his fierce thunder form and rips off her arm in a single flash. Naturally, the rest of the raiders are left frozen in shock after seeing him overpower and kill her with a single move. Meanwhile, our protagonist watches Faye battle the remaining demons. She is still relying on her old habit of fighting defensively. Since her current innate ability allows her to freely switch between offense and defense, he decides to help her. Knowing Faye, she will become much stronger once she understands how to properly use that ability. And by helping, he strikes her with his snake strike, injecting his venom. Once she becomes more sensitive to the flow of energy within her body, she begins to sense an entirely different way her power operates. With that realization, She charges forward and effortlessly wipes out every remaining demon in a single assault. She can now wield both her shield and lance at the same time, transforming into a true fighter tank. Both of them are pleased with the result, and Faye admits that learning something new is not so bad after all. Anyways, with the item secured, it is finally time to head back. The next scene takes us to Faye's basement. Gron examines the blue shell and realizes just how fragile it is. At this rate, they can only afford to use it once. Faye understands the situation and tells him not to worry. Activating the blue shell, her soul is drawn into Gron's body as she enters his soul space. At first, she finds nothing. Then, without warning, a massive statue appears before her. It is the statue of the God of Mercy. Seeing it, Faye wonders if this means our protagonist is actually a merciful and compassionate person. At that moment, Gron suddenly appears beside her. Surprised, she looks at him, but Gron simply reminds her that she is inside his soul, so naturally he can enter as well. Suddenly, something resembling a giant gate is violently torn open within Gron's soul space. Gron has no idea what is happening. Without hesitation, Faye steps through the gateway. Inside, she witnesses Gron's memories beginning with the moment they were all killed. This leads her to believe that what comes next is everything that happened after her own death. She watches Gron's final struggle against the Demon Emperor and sees him end his own life by crushing his own heart. But to her shock, the Demon Emperor possesses another ability besides his evolution through assimilation. Although he clearly dislikes using it, he activates the Cruelty Reincarnation skill. His plan is for his soul to reincarnate into the body of a talented demon so he can continue his grand ambitions. Unfortunately for him, something goes terribly wrong with the skill. As a result, Gron and the rest of his party are reincarnated as well. Sadly, not everyone returns. Since Sokva, the priest of their party, died before the others, she is unable to reincarnate. Although the Demon Emperor's skill was interrupted, Faye concludes that it is still possible the Demon Emperor was reincarnated too. With that realization, the entire memory space begins to shatter as the vision reaches its end. As she falls through the collapsing fragments, she wonders whether she should tell our protagonist everything she has learned. At the same time, she begins to question the mysterious place she has now entered. Where she finds herself is a scene straight out of a horror film. Just then, she overhears Gron's voice offering her guidance and a way out. As she wonders if it is really him, she sees a figure approaching, confirming that it is indeed him. But at that moment, Gron's real voice snaps her back to reality, telling her not to listen because it is not him. Let's just say our protagonist has his own inner demons. Faye remains frozen in place as it tries to devour her. Thankfully, our protagonist intervenes and saves her in the nick of time. Seeing that she is still frozen, he shouts, asking what she is doing and telling her to get out quickly. After that, she finally leaves his soul and returns to the real world. Of course, the first thing she wants to know is the identity of the entity inside his soul. Gron replies that he will tell her when the time is right, before shifting to the main topic. She then tells him what she saw, noting that the Demon Emperor used another innate ability. Gron becomes furious. The only way the Demon Emperor could possess such a skill is because of the Demon Commander, Shu. It turns out Shu's innate ability allows him to steal and bestow innate abilities upon others, much like All for One. Faye points out the obvious. The Demon Emperor will be reincarnated. Gron finds this troublesome because it means they have no idea what abilities he will possess this time. After a lengthy discussion, they draft a detailed summary of everything they currently know. There is obviously a lot of information, but the most important revelation is that the new leaders of the demon race are the 5 demon kings following the Demon Emperor's death 5 years ago. Still, Gron notes that there is one more thing. With hopeful eyes, he asks about Sokva. Instead of answering, Faye abruptly changes the subject. Turning to the little one, Sura comments that she is hungry, and Faye decides they should eat. Gron does not understand why she suddenly changed the subject. So he insists that she tell him the truth. Caught off guard, she remains silent for a moment. She simply does not know how to explain it to him. Before continuing, the narrative shifts to the past. Her junior sister Faya and Meravek are chatting when they notice 2 people sitting by the campfire. Faye immediately steps in and stops them. When they ask why, she questions whether they cannot read the room, prompting Meravek to joke that he has just discovered why his wife divorced him. Meanwhile, Gron and Sokva are chatting when she asks about the corpse marks on his left eye. She listens as Gron explains that they only appear whenever he kills someone he never intended to kill. He also explains that the marks disappear whenever he is happy, which she finds interesting. Because of that, she begins asking about each member of their party. Sokva believes that his relationship with them is what causes the marks to disappear. Our protagonist does not deny it. However, she freezes when he explains that it includes her as well, and yes, it includes her. That statement alone tells everything that needs to be known. Back in the present, Faye simply tells our protagonist that Sokva must have met a different fate. Gron is saddened to hear that because it means she did not survive. Because of this, he becomes even more determined to kill the Demon Emperor a second time, and this time for good. While all of this is happening, the next scene takes us to a village in the kingdom of Yalivia. There, a centaur demon is busy running laps while strapped to heavy weights. Unfortunately, one of those weights happens to be a father desperately enduring the pain of being dragged across the ground while trying to protect his daughter. Seeing this, the demon announces that he is going to increase his speed. The man cries out in agony as he clutches his daughter tightly. Suddenly, something changes. The man's daughter is no longer crying. He can only stare in disbelief as she calmly remarks that the first thing she sees after awakening is suffering. At that very moment, the centaur demon is suddenly pulled backward and brought to a complete stop. Turning around, the rest of the demons are shocked to see that the little girl has suddenly become incredibly powerful. Ignoring them, the girl apologizes for awakening late and making the man suffer. With that, the man is killed in an instant. Obviously, the human girl is the reincarnated demon emperor, Smulus, the last dictator of the Dooley Republic. After killing the girl's father, the demon emperor turns to the remaining demons, her tone laced with disappointment. Her desire has always been to ensure the destruction of humanity without making them suffer. Yet her demons have only made humans suffer even more and have taken pleasure in doing so. When they charge at her, the demon emperor uses her primary innate ability, Great Sin, Punishment Decree. Instantly, the group of demons turns to ash and disintegrates. Once they are dead, Smulus does not expect that the consequences of the failed reincarnation would lead to becoming a human. From the host's memories, she learns that it has been 5 years since her death, causing her to remember our protagonist and the dark entity inside his soul that she once tried to assimilate with. She thinks that if only she had realized it sooner, she would not have let our protagonist become aware of his own existence. Otherwise, things might have turned out differently. Perhaps they would not have needed to do what they did. Meanwhile, a knight rushes toward the demon's location while cursing herself for being late. When she finally arrives, she is naturally left stunned to find only her daughter and not a single demon. Believing her little girl must have suffered terribly, she repeatedly apologizes for arriving too late. Tears stream down her face as she continues apologizing. In response, Smulus begins talking about suffering. This leaves the girl's mother even more shocked as Smulus suddenly uses her sword to cut herself. The woman can only watch in horror as her own daughter takes her own life. At the very same moment, the Demon Emperor activates her primary skill. It is the ability that allows her to evolve and assimilate with another person, and she immediately takes over the body of the girl's mother. Meanwhile, back in the Demon Lands, our protagonist and Faye continue discussing the Demon Emperor's reincarnation. He suggests taking preventive measures to stop the Demon Emperor from possessing the bodies of the two strongest warriors. That is when Faye tells him that Fenling can help them. It turns out she is the silent demon king of the current generation. Faye further explains that she and her sister, Feya, once encountered her. Using Feya's innate ability, which functions like a lie detector, they discovered that Fenling is a righteous person who is unwilling to support the demon race. Naturally, our protagonist believes she is the only person they can rely on. But at that moment, his inner demon asks what he is doing. It reminds Gron of their desire to wipe out all evil in the world, believing that only then will they finally be satisfied. Trying to get his attention, Faye snaps him back to reality. The illusion fades and our protagonist apologizes, saying that he simply got distracted. Later that night, he takes the group to a flat stretch of land while explaining to the confused party that this is part of his preventive measures. As for the plan, Gron intends to summon his students so they can inform humanity about everything they have discovered. While Sura is shocked that he is referring to the Vampire Knight, Faye says she has heard of him. She recalls stories of demons committing suicide simply upon hearing that he was coming. Meanwhile, Gron uses his blood to activate a magic circle and summon him. However, 2 hours pass and nothing happens. Gron assumes it is because he has not summoned him in such a long time. Meanwhile, Faye decides to take a nap since her body consumes a great deal of energy, telling him to wake her once the Vampire Knight arrives. The group continues waiting while our protagonist rests. The little one gradually becomes dejected because she had really been looking forward to meeting the Vampire Knight in person. Just then, she is suddenly startled. She quickly relaxes after realizing it is only a bat. However, when she turns back toward the magic circle, she freezes. A moment later, she screams and calls for Uncle Gron to save her. Although the narrative clearly states that it is the Vampire Knight, the guy looks more like a giant mosquito. Just then, Gron immediately reprimands his student. He stands there like an instructor who is about to give his student the scolding of a lifetime. Seeing our protagonist's expression, the vampire knight notes that the only person capable of summoning him with that formation is long gone. Using his blood-based innate ability to materialize a weapon, he demands to know how our protagonist learned it. Seeing him so uncooperative, Faye is ready to throw hands, but Gron simply stops her and insists that she wait. The vampire knight then suggests that our protagonist confess willingly, otherwise he will make him answer by force. Hearing that, our protagonist gives him a score of 80, assuming another instructor were grading him. As for himself, he says he is deeply disappointed by those cold threats. As his master, he is utterly ashamed. His words simply do not carry the same intimidating aura that our protagonist once had. Hearing our protagonist say that he failed and call him Whelan in such a familiar tone, the vampire knight cannot comprehend how this is even possible. Removing his helmet, he hesitantly asks if he is really Professor Gron. Before we continue, the narrative shifts to the Royal Academy. Of course, it would not be a Royal Academy without arrogant nobles and entitled bastards. The one bullying Whelan happens to be the heir of the Lawrence family. Seeing Whelan in tears and begging not to be burned with the red-hot iron because he does not want his mother to worry, Mordor pretends to sympathize with him for a moment. He comments on how differently Whelan treats his mother compared to the people in his own household. Even so, he presses the scorching iron against Whelan's arm, remarking that it is none of his business. As Whelan cries out in pain, Mordor prepares to burn his other arm. Suddenly, someone steps in. That person is none other than our protagonist. He stares the fool down while crushing the red-hot iron in his bare hand as though it were nothing. He then warns Mordor that if this ever happens again, he will make sure his family has to shovel his remains back home. Naturally, the boy acts like the arrogant noble brat he is. He even dares to point a finger at our protagonist, dismissing him as nothing more than a commoner who merely happens to be a professor. In response, our protagonist literally throws him and his gang out of the top-floor window. Without even looking back, he heals Wyland's injuries and prepares to leave. Watching this, Wyland tries to stop him. He does his best to chase after our protagonist for days, but Gron simply ignores him the entire time. He continues walking straight into his classroom. The poor guy only wanted to thank him, yet he gets completely shut out. As Whelan turns around, he overhears two students talking about Professor Gron's classes. He follows them as one of them explains that Professor Gron is the man who single-handedly wiped out countless demons within demon territory. In other words, anyone who dreams of becoming a demon slayer and a hero considers attending his class a top priority. That is why so many princes, princesses, and high-ranking nobles enroll in his lessons. As they continue talking, Whelan quietly decides to leave. He reflects on everything and concludes that, with someone as accomplished as our protagonist, a simple thank you probably is not necessary. But at that very moment, vines suddenly wrap around him. Of course, it is Mordor and his gang. They offer Whelan a way out. All he has to do is lure our protagonist to the Lawrence family estate. Unfortunately for them, Whelan is no fool. He bluntly tells them to go to hell. In response, Mordor chuckles wickedly, admitting that he never expected Whelan to be this stubborn. He begins tightening the vines, slowly crushing Whelan's bones while already thinking about how to dispose of his corpse afterward. Throughout it all, Whelan keeps thinking that the Lawrence family are nothing but scum and that they will eventually kill our protagonist. He could use his innate ability to escape. Unfortunately, the ability terrifies him so much that he does not even know how to activate it. Just when he believes he is about to die, our protagonist appears once again and saves him. Gron can tell the kid is truly something as Whelan hurriedly explains everything that happened. However, our protagonist simply shrugs after learning that Mordor wanted him dead. Well, that is because Mordor and his gang are currently skydiving without parachutes. And just like that, they crash to their deaths. Whelan is left speechless. Our protagonist calmly reminds him that he had already warned them their parents would end up shoveling their remains back home. Turning toward the stunned Whelan, he tells him to attend his class the following day because he already knows about the boy's frightening innate ability. With that, he walks away. This time, Whelan follows him and finally gets the chance to thank him. He even offers to bring one of his mother's homemade fruit pies just for him. Back in the present, after learning everything, Whelan assures our protagonist that he will complete the task. However, Gron reminds him that the most important thing is making sure the two most important people are protected. Meanwhile, Sura looks at Faye for an explanation because she is completely lost in the conversation. Faye explains that our protagonist is referring to the two pillars of humanity, the greatest powerhouses alive. The first is Emperor Hoya, the king of Anija, also known as the liberator of humanity. The second is Rainstorm Yuha, the leader of the Northern Alliance and the strongest among the Ultimate Warriors. However, Rainstorm is currently in seclusion, so Whelan explains that delivering the message to him will be extremely difficult. Shockingly enough, he is also the only man alive who managed to survive a direct confrontation with our protagonist. Regardless, our protagonist insists that he leave immediately because every passing second is another opportunity for the Demon Emperor to make a move. Whelan promises that he will not fail the mission before taking off through the sky like a giant mosquito. Watching him disappear into the distance, Sura and Faye openly share their thoughts about his choice of armor. As for our protagonist, he believes that with this matter taken care of, they can finally focus on tracking the Demon Emperor's reincarnation within demon territory. The following day, in preparation for their journey to meet the silent Demon King, our protagonist goes to secure horses while telling Faye to prepare pottery jars. She is confused, so Gron's tone turns dangerously calm as he explains that, because of the Demon Emperor's reincarnation ability, he cannot truly be killed. Apparently, our protagonist plans to cut off all of the Demon Emperor's limbs. The Demon Emperor still would not die because our protagonist intends to keep healing him. Even after his death, every future generation would continue the same punishment. In simple terms, the Demon Emperor is destined to face eternal and never-ending torture. Hearing this, Faye breaks into a cold sweat, thankful that a monster like our protagonist is fighting on their side. The next scene shifts to Mount Roundair. Faye's subordinates are busy talking about how our protagonist dueled their leader and ended the fight in a draw. Hearing this, the cavalry commander simply scoffs, claiming that if given the chance, he could kill Faye himself and take her position. At that moment, however, his companions tells him to be quiet because our protagonist has just arrived. Seeing him, the demon commander is arrogant at first and even reaches for his sword, but the very next moment, he almost soils himself as he realizes he has just made a terrible mistake. He lets out a sigh of relief when Gron simply ignores him and heads straight for the horses. Just as our protagonist is about to leave, a demon suddenly announces that Lord Desert Fang has arrived. The demon proudly strolls in, while the surrounding demons kneel because he is Faye's second in command. Watching him display such an arrogant personality, Gron immediately labels him a shameless sycophant and genuinely feels the urge to kill him. The demon commander shares the same opinion. In his eyes, Desert Fang is nothing but pathetic. Unfortunately, he is still the second in command, leaving them powerless to do anything. Sadly for them, Desert Fang overhears their whispers and immediately flies into a rage, forcing the demon commander to apologize repeatedly. Because of this, our protagonist decides not to kill him. A pathetic pawn like Desert Fang is actually useful. He even admits that Faye made the right choice by making him her second in command. As Desert Fang approaches, Gron is about to offer him some advice. Before he can finish speaking, Desert Fang interrupts by spitting the food in his mouth directly onto Gron's face while asking if he dares teach him how to do his job. He becomes even angrier when our protagonist refuses to kneel. Although Gron deliberately holds himself back, the demon continues provoking him. Desert Fang even orders another demon to prepare something for our protagonist. His demand is shocking. He wants Gron to kowtow and plant his face directly into a pile of animal waste. The surrounding demons watch the scene unfold and find it highly entertaining. Meanwhile, Gron simply thinks the fool is an unbearable nuisance. Although he wants to teach him a lesson, beating him too badly would cause Desert Fang to lose face and authority, creating unnecessary problems later. Meanwhile, Desert Fang continues forcing him to kneel. In response, our protagonist simply makes him trip. Desert Fang falls face first into the pile of waste, humiliating himself as the entire crowd bursts into laughter. At that very moment, Faye arrives. The atmosphere instantly falls silent as she asks what Desert Fang is doing. He immediately runs over, explains the situation, and insists that she punish our protagonist. Before turning back, he even flashes our protagonist the middle finger, convinced that he is finished. Instead, Faye immediately stabs him with her lance and orders him to kneel. Desert Fang is completely confused and asks why he is the one kneeling before our protagonist. In response, Faye coldly warns that if he dares question her authority again, he will end up in a coffin. She then announces to everyone that our protagonist is someone special and that they are to treat him with the same respect they show her. The demons immediately begin whispering among themselves, spreading rumors that our protagonist must be an important figure sent by the brutal Demon King. In the end, they all conclude that Desert Fang has stepped on a landmine by offending someone he never should have provoked. Desert Fang overhears the rumors and reaches the same conclusion. Because of that, he vows to work diligently and redeem himself. Before leaving, Faye once again assures our protagonist that the silent Demon King Fenling despises the Demon Emperor and will surely help them. With that, they set off for the royal court of the silent Demon King. That same night, in the eternal royal capital known as New White City, a secret meeting is held inside a grand castle with all of the Demon Kings present. One of the Demon Kings thanks everyone for attending before revealing that the purpose of the meeting is to discuss ways to civilize the demon race. One of them introduces the concept of faith. They propose that demons should begin worshipping the previous Demon King as a demon god. The War Demon King, Argicola, agrees with the proposal, believing that dead people are sometimes more useful than the living. The cruel Demon King, Udred, has no objections. The same goes for the Demon King of Desolation, who points out that Shu already has his son's support, so there is naturally no need to seek the father's approval. Meanwhile, we finally meet the silent Demon King, Fenling. She wonders why she was invited in the first place and finds the entire meeting painfully boring, because she wants nothing to do with the demon race. At that moment, Shu, the eternal Demon King, says that he respects Fenling's choices and would never force her to abandon her old way of thinking. He believes that one day they will eventually come to understand each other. He explains that exterminating humanity is not his true goal, but merely a means of reforming the world. Nonetheless, she excuses herself and decides to leave. As she does, Shu insists they continue with their meeting. Meanwhile, our protagonist and his group successfully enter the unclaimed territory. They travel at full speed on their horses. Willan is doing the same as he races to deliver the information about the Demon Emperor's reincarnation. Eventually, he reaches the kingdom of Enia's wartime capital, the Restoration City. Inside the king's castle, an official leads him to meet the king, while insisting that Willan should not be formal because they do not care about court etiquette. Willan appreciates this but explains that he is simply a man of few words. Anyways, he is about to meet the first person our protagonist told him to see, Emperor Hoya. He explains that the emperor is known as the Iron-Fisted Monarch, a top-tier powerhouse who rose to power by killing his own kin. The man is about to have his lunch. Seeing Willan, he welcomes him, noting that his 8th son speaks highly of him. He also apologizes for not being able to attend the ceremony when Willan was knighted. Nonetheless, he insists that Willan take a seat since it just happens to be lunchtime. Hearing this, the official who brought Willan in, who turns out to be the prime minister, notes Emperor Hoya's good manners. So the emperor immediately suggests recording it in the White Book. The narrative explains that the kingdom of Enia has 2 royal books. The White Book is used to record great deeds and achievements, while the Black Book records the opposite throughout history. The emperor explains that the main purpose of these books is to keep future emperors in check, while Willan silently thinks to himself that the man is different from what he imagined. Nonetheless, he sits down and informs the emperor that he has information relating to the Demon Emperor and the 5 heroes. Eventually, by the end of the meal, he finishes telling him everything. From the entire report, the emperor understands that our protagonist wants everyone to refrain from killing in order to avoid getting possessed and assimilated by the Demon Emperor. He also explains to Willan that Rainstorm is currently training at Armored Rock Island and promises to have the message delivered. At that moment, the same prime minister enters, informing the emperor that a secret agent dispatched to the demon lands has returned. Wylan is about to leave, but the emperor stops him. However, when Wylan explains that this would be improper, Emperor Hoya points out that he has endured a long journey. Wylan insists that a servant can guide him since the emperor is about to hold an important meeting himself. In response, Emperor Hoya tells him that it is impossible because everyone is currently on their lunch break while they wait for the secret agent to enter. To our absolute surprise, the secret agent turns out to be the very same shrieking demon that attacked the demon training camp before flying away. Wylan is a bit stunned, while the demon Limmersdorf is equally shocked to see the vampire knight in person. Since the two are meeting each other for the first time, Emperor Hoya quickly introduces them, explaining that Limmersdorf serves as his royal secret agent. While the emperor leaves with Limmersdorf to hear his report, Wylan waits in the dining room, wondering how a demon manages to serve the emperor. After the report, Limmersdorf returns and informs Wylan that the emperor suddenly has other matters to attend to, meaning he will be the one to escort Wylan to his room. He can also tell that Wylan does not trust him. When he explains that anyone would naturally struggle to trust a demon, Limmersdorf immediately corrects him, saying that it is simply an employment relationship after realizing Wylan misunderstood the situation. Seeing Wylan's skepticism, Limmersdorf sighs as he reaches for something while explaining his employment arrangement with the emperor. He then pulls out 2 gold bars and asks if the vampire knight can tell the difference between them. He explains that humans and demons are all the same because they constantly kill each other, but he is built differently. His only desire is to save enough money to leave the war behind and find a distant island where he can live peacefully away from everything. Wylan finds his logic amusing and asks when a demon even began thinking this way. Limmersdorf admits that he understands Wylan's perspective, but honestly, he simply wants to be left alone and enjoy life. He then switches to flattery, praising Wylan's teacher, our protagonist, for being selfless and constantly fighting to protect people. Wylan finds the praise a little over the top. Then Limmersdorf suddenly changes his tone. Although our protagonist appears noble and selfless, he wonders if the man has some dark secret. Before he can finish his sentence, Wylan immediately points his sword at him. He coldly warns the idiot to think carefully about his next words. Panicking, Limmersdorf quickly explains that he was only joking and speaking casually after all. If our protagonist had not slain most of the demons during his time, he never would have escaped. While all of this is happening, the next scene takes us back to the unclaimed territory of the Demon Lands. Looking at a map, Groan thinks that at their current pace, it will take them at least half a month to complete the journey. He then asks Sura if she has any innate ability because they need to stay prepared, even though the unclaimed land seems deserted. The little girl explains that she does sometimes. She feels as if something is helping her forge, but she has never fully tested it. Gron thinks she is a genius for realizing this on her own, and decides to lecture her on the basics of using her mark power. He begins by explaining that innate ability is a force that remains in constant supply as long as a person is alive. Its source is the heart, and it radiates throughout the body while remaining invisible. The basic applications of mark power are divided into 4. They begin with mobilization and end with reshaping. He further explains all 4 applications in detail. For instance, he can use mobilization to move and concentrate his power into his hand, allowing him to pierce through objects. The same concept also applies when he wants to use his snake bloodline's thermal vision. As for the remaining 3, he explains that Faye uses amplification to increase her mark power. She then uses release to emit that power onto the surface of her body. Finally, there is reshaping. As the name suggests, this application allows him to reshape certain body parts or even change his form entirely. Starting with the basics, he instructs Sura to use the first application, mobilization, while telling her there is no need to shout its name like some Power Ranger. Sura does so and immediately sees her power glowing around her hand. She can even feel the difference as she swings her forging hammer much faster. Seeing this, our protagonist explains that mark power can also be infused into weapons because it naturally decays over time. This is why fighters and warriors with innate abilities like hers use heavenly steel weapons. Since his priority is keeping her safe, she needs to be able to defend herself. Groan decides to test her defense by striking her with his sword. Sura confidently trusts that he will definitely go easy on her. However, that thought dies the moment he mentions healing her if she ends up with a broken hand. The little girl becomes absolutely terrified and may even end up with lifelong trust issues. Thankfully, nothing happens, and her innate ability fully manifests. The little creatures that appear resembling tiny minions are known as the Orichalcum Legion. Seeing this, our protagonist explains that they only manifest when she faces a genuine life-threatening crisis. Sura becomes excited as she asks our protagonist what to do next. Recalling how innate abilities work, he suggests trying release and reshape first. Amplification is too dangerous because it forces the heart to generate more mark power, which could easily kill her. The moment she uses release, her little legion springs into action. Everyone watches as each tiny soldier climbs onto Faye's armor and takes its assigned position. Seeing this, Groan suggests that she try reshape next to use it properly. She needs to rely on her imagination. Since she is a craftsman, she imagines her little legion carrying tiny weapons. The sight is absolutely adorable as the little soldiers stand guard, and even keep watch like real sentries. At that moment, our protagonist introduces a new concept. He explains that even without an innate ability, she can awaken an acquired mark through her crafting skills. Naturally, Sura does not understand, so Gron explains that an acquired mark appears when someone reaches the pinnacle of mastery in a particular profession or class. It follows principles similar to an innate ability, except it is specifically tied to occupations and specialized skills. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted when Sura's little legion spots a flock of startled birds. The moment Groan hears this, he immediately tells everyone to put out the fire before it attracts unwanted attention. Soon the group notices another party approaching. At first glance, anyone would assume they are demons. In reality, they are humans disguised as demons, hoping to escape safely and return to the Inia kingdom. Among them, a knight drags the injured 9th princess on a stretcher after she is wounded by their pursuers. Of course, Faye and our protagonist notice this, and Faye wonders why a member of the royal family is in the Demon Lands. Meanwhile, Groan immediately recognizes the 9th princess of Inia. He explains that her name is Colossus Yvette. She was once one of his students at the Royal Academy, and is also the adopted daughter of Emperor Hoya. Even so, that still does not explain why she came to the Demon Lands. Wanting answers, our protagonist decides to spy on them. His snake quietly slithers closer while the knight blames 2 members of the group for slowing everyone down. Our protagonist listens as the man continues venting his frustration and eventually reveals the reason they entered the Demon Lands. It has something to do with his severed arm, leaving both Gron and Faye confused at first. Faye wonders if they are trying to use our protagonist's severed arm to create a new life form. Gron believes that is likely the case as he recalls the overwhelming power his original body once possessed. Meanwhile, the team's scout apologizes for failing to detect the Great Demon earlier. If he had noticed it sooner, the princess would never have ended up in such a terrible condition. It turns out the Great Demon currently possesses Gron's original severed arm, and they only learned this information after paying the shrieking demon Limosdorf. Seeing the two struggling to carry the princess, the knight concludes that they are completely useless. In the end, he grabs the rope himself and decides to carry her alone. Noticing their shocked expressions, the knight commander reminds them that he is a knight of the Inia kingdom. He orders them to keep moving, leaving the scout completely confused. At that moment, Princess Yvette suddenly coughs up blood. The knight immediately orders the healer to save her. The little healer does everything she can, but sadly explains that there is little she can do because she has already exhausted her mark power. At that moment, our protagonist suddenly appears alongside Faye. The instant they approach, the scout immediately fires his crossbow. Our protagonist casually catches the first arrow, while every other shot simply bounces harmlessly off Faye, as if she were made of rubber. After telling them such hostility is unnecessary, he offers them a trade. The knight refuses to listen, so Groan makes a different offer. He will heal the princess, and in return he wants information about his severed arm. The knight considers the proposal for a moment before finally accepting. Gron begins healing her while thinking that the great demon should never be underestimated if it can leave someone as powerful as Yvette in such a miserable state. During the treatment, she suddenly coughs up blood once again. Naturally, this makes the knight furious. Gron simply ignores him, thinking the man is far too sensitive. Turning to the princess, he calmly tells her not to move too much, since she has only just been healed. Meanwhile, the rest of the group is relieved to see her regain consciousness. The little healer remarks that our protagonist's healing magic is incredible, rivaling only that of the Desolation Demon King, Minaton. Meanwhile, the scout is confused because the knight is forcing him to apologize on his behalf, even though the knight himself was the one at fault. Nonetheless, Princess Yvette thanks our protagonist for saving her. She is also surprised that he can communicate so fluently, just like Limosdorf. When he mentions that he expects something in return, Princess Yvette realizes that he made an agreement with Knight Lero while she was unconscious and accepts that it should be honored. However, she immediately falls silent the moment our protagonist mentions the severed arm. When she refuses to answer, Gron tells her to let Knight Lero speak for himself. Princess Yvette immediately orders him not to say anything, while Lero can only apologize, explaining that the matter is too important to humanity. Unfortunately for them, our protagonist has already anticipated this outcome and made preparations beforehand. Not long after, Princess Yvette realizes it as well, apparently. Our protagonist poisoned her while healing her. Now she has only two choices: willingly reveal the information or die from the poison. However, she believes our protagonist is bluffing because the poison is not lethal and only weakens her body. Now Knight Lero finds himself trapped. If he obeys the princess and keeps his mouth shut, Gron calmly points out that the princess will be dead in just 2 minutes. Knight Lero tells our protagonist and Faye to wait, but Princess Yvette insists that he ignore them because she is fine. Although she looks weak, she believes she can resist the poison until her mark power recovers. Seeing this, Faye turns to Gron and wonders if this is really okay. Gron calmly tells her not to worry because Emperor Hoya's children are not cowards. In other words, the first person to break will be the knight. Just as Gron predicts, Lero finally gives them the information. He reveals that the severed arm is in the hands of Jehua. Jehua is the great warlord. He once served the previous and first-generation Cruelty Demon King. After the Demon King died, Jehua feared for his life, fled, and eventually became a bandit. It is a highly classified secret that the Great Warlord possesses the severed arm, and their mission was to retrieve it to boost the morale of the Enya Kingdom's citizens and army. However, no one anticipated that the demon would fuse with Gron's severed arm and become several times stronger. Gron quietly listens as Lero explains that this is how they were caught off guard, resulting in Princess Yvette's injuries. He also tells them to head west to the ruins of Mutown, where Jehua is currently recovering. Faye and our protagonist silently discuss the information. In the end, they decide to head there. Gron grabs Faye by the arm before transforming into a dark streak, disappearing and leaving the knights behind. Naturally, Lero is furious and swears under his breath. At that exact moment, Princess Yvette tells him to forget about them. The knight is stunned when he sees that she has fully recovered. Realizing his mistake, he immediately drops to one knee and apologizes. Meanwhile, the others point out that he has just disobeyed a direct military order. If they do not plead on his behalf, he could be executed once they return home. Princess Yvette simply tells him to stand up. She assures Lero that it was not his fault, adding that she should have explained the situation more clearly. She believes that even with the information, our protagonist and Faye have no chance of defeating Jehua. That is why she decides they should recover first before coming up with a proper strategy. However, at that very moment, the scout suddenly spots a group of approaching demons. Seeing them in the distance, she immediately orders everyone to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, the newcomers announce that they have finally found them. It turns out they are the bandits from the unclaimed territory known as the Skin Hunting Brotherhood. They are most likely the same pursuers sent by Jehua. Princess Yvette remains calm and orders everyone to hold their positions while she recovers enough mark power to fight. Just then, one of the demons steps forward and suggests to his leader that they should weaken their enemies first. After receiving permission, he activates his innate ability. Riddle Leech whenever the demon asks a riddle. Leeches attach themselves to the target. If the victim answers incorrectly or takes too long to respond, the leeches begin draining their mark power. The The worst part is that the leeches continue draining their victims until they eventually die. Since the leeches cannot be destroyed, the scout decides to eliminate the riddle leech demon first. Princess Yvette immediately tries to stop him. The scout fires his arrows, but the demon is incredibly agile and effortlessly dodges every shot. Seeing this, the leader orders the rest of his men to attack while the riddle leech demon proudly boasts about his innate ability. Princess Yvette's group is terrified, knowing they are moments away from being slaughtered. In the blink of an eye, Gron suddenly appears, calmly reminding Yvette that he told her not to move too much. Before anyone can react, he wipes out most of the demons with a single attack. Seeing this, Princess Yvette wonders if our protagonist has really come back to help them. As if reading her mind, Faye appears beside her and tells her to consider this a welcome gift for their alliance. She explains that after leaving, she and our protagonist concluded that the best way to defeat Joa is by working together. While they continue talking, our protagonist completely dominates the battlefield. His corp's innate ability continues to grow stronger. At the same time, his snake bloodline evolves to the third mark, unlocking a brand new form that resembles a transformation from Dragon Ball Z. Realizing they can no longer sit back, the gang leader and the riddle leech demon decide to fight personally. The leader uses his sand innate ability to create a massive sandstorm for cover, while the riddle leech demon activates his ability to weaken our protagonist. Gron calmly answers the demon's riddle. The demon immediately claims the answer is wrong. As a result, the leech begins absorbing Gron's mark power at an exponential rate. Annoyed by the entire situation, Gron activates his snake's thermal vision to locate the demon hidden within the sandstorm. The instant he finds him, he closes the distance in a flash and tears the demon's lower jaw clean off with his bare hand. Witnessing such brutality leaves Princess Yvette completely stunned, while Lero begins to panic after remembering how rudely he treated our protagonist earlier. Seeing this display of strength, the leader of the Skin Hunting Brotherhood praises our protagonist, acknowledging that he is truly powerful. Using both his sand innate ability and authority, he creates a gigantic moving sand castle equipped with siege weapons. He declares that he will kill Groan and turn his skin into a coat. Moments later, one of the demons fires a projectile, but Groan effortlessly dodges the attack. As everyone stares at the enormous fortress, Princess Yvette's group shares their thoughts. Even Faye agrees with Lero, pointing out that although the moving sandcastle is enormous, it is extremely impractical and must consume an enormous amount of mark power to maintain. Suddenly, our protagonist's group is surrounded from both sides. Two giant demons burst out from beneath the ground, trapping everyone in the middle. Naturally, the rest of Princess Yvette's group is terrified. Thankfully, at that very moment, the princess has finally recovered enough mark power to use her innate ability. Seeing this, Groan casually deactivates his transformed state and tells Faye that they should simply enjoy the show. After all, Princess Yvette's innate ability is Celestial Body. The moment she activates it, her body grows several times larger than the giant demons themselves. A single strike is enough to crush both of them. Meanwhile, Groan and Faye quietly watch from the sidelines. Gron admits that letting one of his former students handle the job is not a bad idea. Perhaps that is exactly why he once gave her the title Colossal Yvette. The girl is a literal titan. She effortlessly smashes part of the moving sandcastle and finishes off the leader of the Skin Hunting Brotherhood in the process, leaving behind an enormous crater in the ground. At the same time, our protagonist notices movement in the distance. It turns out to be the evil dragon of the unclaimed territory that was mentioned earlier. The group explains that the dragon was born only a year ago, yet it has already grown so powerful that even the demon race fears it. Hearing this, Gron suggests they avoid drawing its attention at all costs. After the battle, Princess Yvette deactivates her innate ability and agrees to our protagonist's proposal. Both sides agree to search for the severed arm together on the surface. However, neither side truly trusts the other. Secretly, both Gron and Princess Yvette plan to seize the severed arm the moment the other lowers their guard. Night soon falls, and the two groups set up separate camps. For some reason, there is now a fifth person among Princess Yvette's party who was never mentioned before. Putting that aside, Princess Yvette decides to visit our protagonist's camp for a while, and Knight Lero agrees. When she arrives, she notices Sura sitting comfortably with the demons and cannot help wondering if she is seeing things. After all, anyone would question why a little girl is casually camping alongside demons. Meanwhile, Princess Yvette and her companions discuss the agreement. Lero admits that he dislikes the idea of sharing the hero's arm with demons. The scout agrees but points out that things would have been even worse if the uncrowned knight captain had been there instead. They are referring to Marevek, a legendary knight regarded as the role model of every Dragonia knight. Lero openly admits that Marevek is also his idol, and praises him for fighting countless battles without receiving a single scar. At that moment, the mysterious stranger in the group asks the little healer for a taste of her food. The little girl immediately refuses, saying it was made by her mother and is too valuable to share. It is then that Lero suddenly realizes there is an imposter among them. However, he cannot tell whether the stranger is actually a demon. The mysterious person calmly confirms his suspicion and even remarks that it would not be surprising if the imposter were the evil dragon itself. This causes Lero to ask our protagonist's group if they recognize the newcomer. However, everyone simply looks confused and remains silent. The stranger immediately takes advantage of the hesitation. The instant Lero lowers his guard, the mysterious figure uses the flowing water sword branch technique to slice off the thumbs of several members of Princess Yvette's party. Our protagonist instantly recognizes the sword technique. Faye immediately confirms the stranger's identity. In other words, the person standing before them is none other than the Holy Knight, Marevech, unaware of his true intentions. Princess Yvette prepares to fight as she reaches for her weapon. Seeing this, Marevech calmly tells her that he has come under his master's orders to capture her. In response, Princess Yvette turns to our protagonist and asks for his help. Having recognized Marevech's technique, she knows she cannot defeat him alone. Our protagonist steps forward. Meanwhile, Faye tells everyone to wait, believing there may simply be a misunderstanding and that they should negotiate first. Soon, our protagonist and Marevech stand face to face. Marevech speaks first. He immediately recognizes his old friend, saying that only one person could possess such an overwhelming aura. He then casually greets Faye as well, even commenting on how much she has grown. Watching the conversation, Princess Yvette is stunned. Marevech is speaking to them as though they have known each other for years. Even Faye seems confused, especially by the way Marevech addresses the princess as if he is personally familiar with her. Suddenly, Marevech makes his move. The entire conversation was nothing more than a distraction to make everyone lower their guard. Fortunately, nothing happens because our protagonist intercepts the attack at the very last moment. Without another word, our protagonist's former party member transforms into a dragon and declares that he will not allow Grun to interfere with his mission. The fight begins, and throughout the battle, Marevech repeatedly expresses how much he hates our protagonist. He blames him for the person he has become. Faye quickly steps in, hoping to calm the situation. However, Marevech simply scoffs when she tells him to calm down. Using the same water-breathing technique, he swiftly slashes off the arms of everyone who tries to interfere. Faye realizes that, with her arms gone, she can no longer use many of her skills. Still, she wonders if Marevech has been brainwashed, considering he keeps talking about his master. Clenching her gauntlets, she declares that she will knock him back to his senses. In response, Marevech calmly tells her that his mind has never been clearer. He then activates a new skill that transforms his body into mist. The sight irritates Faye, as she never expected him to learn such an ability. Meanwhile, our protagonist focuses on treating everyone's injuries while secretly using his snake's thermal vision to track Marevech's movements. Realizing he has been found, Marevech switches from the water element to fire. He traps everyone inside a blazing fire cage while Sura manages to pull Princess Yvette's party to safety. Inside the cage, Groan realizes that Marevech must have carefully observed their previous battles to learn how to counter all of their abilities. Meanwhile, Princess Yvette is more concerned about how he plans to attack them next to prepare for the assault. Faye activates her newly developed skill, Dawn Guard, to protect everyone, while our protagonist uses his net lightning technique. Outside the barrier, the scout asks whether the little healer can restore their injuries. Unfortunately, she cannot. The pain is so overwhelming that she cannot even concentrate. At that moment, Marevech suddenly appears before her, frightening the little girl. He calmly tells the terrified healer that he never intended to kill them. That is precisely why he only severed their fingers. Afterward, he turns toward our protagonist and Faye's defensive formation. Rather than attacking recklessly, he studies it carefully, wondering how he can break through. Just then, Lero angrily lashes out at him for daring to call himself Marevech. Marevech simply chuckles, amused that a mere knight has the courage to speak to him that way. Lero refuses to back down. He declares that Marevech has disgraced the name of his greatest idol, so cursing him is only natural. Marevech then reveals a shocking truth. He explains that he spent his entire life fighting countless battles in pursuit of the title of the First Knight. Yet no matter how many victories he achieved, he was always called the Second Knight, the Flawless Knight. The reason is simple. The title of First Knight was reserved exclusively for Emperor Hoya's eldest son. No matter how accomplished he became, he could never surpass that position. But among demons, only strength matters. As long as he continues growing stronger, he can one day become the next demon emperor. With those words, he transforms into a dragon and takes to the skies. Seeing him flying overhead, our protagonist tells Princess Yvette to attack the moment she spots an opening. She immediately throws her sword like a spear while activating her innate ability. Naturally, the sword grows to an enormous size. Marevech effortlessly dodges it, dismissing the attack as nothing more than a cheap trick. What he fails to realize is that our protagonist never intended for the sword to hit him. It is merely a distraction to close the distance. Activating his third form, Grun unleashes his Skyfall swordsmanship. This time, the strike lands squarely on Marevech. Someone watching the battle from afar witnesses the entire exchange. The old man lets out a disappointed sigh, never expecting the evil dragon to fail his mission of capturing the ninth princess. Meanwhile, Grun lands gracefully on the ground. Instead of continuing the fight, Marevech retreats. Faye finds his sudden withdrawal suspicious, but Grun casually drops a bombshell. He tells her that Marevech had been acting throughout the entire battle. This is because our protagonist remembers Marevech smiling when they initially clashed and asking if he noticed the scar on his face. Faya once asked whether the wound hurt. Marevech admitted that it did, but insisted it was absolutely worth it. They finally had encountered a powerful demon capable of leaving a scar on him. Proud of the achievement, He even used a feather to widen the wound so the scar would look even more impressive. To him, it was the ultimate symbol of a warrior's pride. Just as he finished admiring his handiwork, our protagonist suddenly appeared. Without asking for permission, he instinctively cast healing magic. Watching the scar disappear, Faya struggled to hold back her laughter. Meanwhile, Mirovech sat there completely speechless. That was how his handsome scar vanished. Returning to the present, Mirovech secretly tells our protagonist that someone is watching him. To Gron's surprise, Faye confirms the same thing. She reveals that Mirovech secretly conveyed the exact same message when he ripped off her arm. Since both of them know Mirovech would never willingly serve anyone, Gron finally realizes the truth. All the talk about serving a master was nothing more than an act. It was simply an excuse to justify his actions while someone else watched from the shadows. Meanwhile, Mirovech meets with the man who was watching him to explain why the mission failed. As the latest information contradicts the report Mirovech received the previous day, the man tries to reassure him, saying that plans often change. However, Mirovech points out that he was injured by our protagonist and claims that Gron has already reached the 5th mark. According to him, challenging such an opponent without proper preparation would be foolish. Of course, this is a complete lie, as we alone know our protagonist has only reached the 3rd mark. Since the man has no way of knowing that, he asks what kind of support Mirovech believes he needs. Mirovech finally reveals his request. He wants a secret medicine from the man's master, a special drug that will allow him to break through to the 6th mark. Quickly understanding the situation, the man tells Mirovech not to be greedy. Emperor Hoya creates the potion himself using his innate ability, meaning the supply is limited. Even the flawless knight can only receive 1 bottle every 6 months. In response, Mirovech points out that without it, he cannot grow any stronger. Still, the man insists that asking for 10 bottles is far too much. Just like that, the two of them go back and forth. In the end, Mirovech settles for 2 bottles. In return, he promises to keep tabs on the princess and her group. On the other side, our protagonist tells Faye they should probably rest. Judging from their encounter with Mirovech, that man clearly has plans of his own. Suddenly they are interrupted by Princess Yvette, who respectfully addresses them by their previous names. Faye unintentionally responds, giving them away. Because of that, our protagonist decides to reveal everything. Naturally, Princess Yvette's party is left stunned after Gron recounts everything. The entire group immediately drops to one knee to show their respect. Even Princess Yvette personally thanks them for saving them 3 different times and promises to repay the favor. While Faye and Sura find the gesture unnecessary, our protagonist suggests they come up with a plan to take his arm back from Ji Hua. Of course, the princess agrees and even promises to follow his commands. Her party members are equally excited. After all, it is not every day someone gets to fight alongside the legendary hero who killed the demon emperor. Afterward, our protagonist tells the little one to light the campfire. She happily agrees, pointing out that they cannot sleep without some warmth. Using the magic of the ancient fire god, Karhead, she casts a simple fire lighting spell. It is a common spell among blacksmiths. All she has to do is silently chant the fire god's name and release her mark power through her fingertips. Later that night, while everyone else gets some sleep, our protagonist keeps watch. Well, almost everyone. The little healer quietly approaches him. She explains that she has read about his deeds in the records compiled by the Order Church. The ears of Princess Yvette's party immediately perk up because they are eager to hear about a particular incident involving our protagonist. The little healer asks if the story about him and Sokva in Milu village is true. Hearing that Princess Yvette's party cannot hide their disappointment, they had been expecting her to ask about the truth behind White Road City instead. Princess Yvette quietly tells them to watch their mouths. Meanwhile, Faye insists that the little healer should get some sleep, silently wondering why she had to bring up the one story Gron dislikes talking about. However, Gron tells her it is fine. Since the girl is curious, he decides to tell her the story himself. He explains that the hero party had only just been formed when they passed through a village that had been destroyed by demons. Although Gron insisted on handling everything alone, Sokva insisted on following him. During the attack, a newlywed couple was killed in the middle of their wedding ceremony. Their anger and resentment turned them into vengeful ghosts. When Gron encounters them, he uses his mark power to separate the two spirits. Turning to Sokva, he tells her to use holy light to purify them, something she does not understand at the time. That is when Gron finally makes his intentions clear, catching her completely by surprise. With that, she casts holy light. Just like that, the couple is finally liberated, allowing them to peacefully pass on. As that happens, something also changes between Sokva and our protagonist. The holy sage begins seeing Gron in a completely different light. Moved by the moment, she gently reaches for Gron's hand. Normally, anyone would expect a heartfelt response from our protagonist. Unfortunately, Gron's first reaction is to draw his sword and attack. His holy sword stops only inches away from Sokva's face. Realizing what he has done, he immediately retracts his sword. Sokva nervously asks if she had been too forward. However, Gron simply apologizes. Naturally, she is left confused. He apologizes once again, explaining that he had no warning. The sudden physical contact made him instinctively uncomfortable. Hearing that, Sokva apologizes as well for being too reckless. The little healer is completely speechless as Gron casually admits that. Back then, he had drawn his sword purely on instinct because he thought he was under enemy attack. He then continues his story while Faye silently thinks to herself that this is exactly what she expects from a blockhead like Gron. Meanwhile, Princess Yvette and her party can only conclude that our protagonist is an absolute badass. Eventually, the group arrives at the ruined town within the unclaimed territory. Observing the area from a high vantage point, Faye concludes that the terrain is unfavorable. Our protagonist reaches the same conclusion. Charging in blindly would be reckless, so he decides to sneak in alone. He enters the town and blends into a group of demons preparing to take the assessment test to join the Jiwagang. Just then, another demon arrives with human slaves captured from the Conquest King's court. The traitor approaches one of the demons overseeing the recruitment and explains how difficult it is to obtain women, because the Conquest King's court is filled with men. He says he simply got lucky enough to secure one. Seeing this, our protagonist decides to wait for the perfect opportunity to let Princess Yvette and the others rescue the human slaves. His expression darkens when he hears what they plan to do with the male slaves. Meanwhile, the demon in charge of recruitment calls for the next applicant to enter the assessment hall. Gron forcefully walks forward, shoving every demon out of his way. The moment he enters, a demon seated behind a table welcomes the applicants. Gron is surprised by the sheer number of demons hoping to join the great demon. Nonetheless, the demon seated at the table introduces himself as the chief examiner, Clover. Clover hopes everyone already knows the recruitment standards because they only accept the very best. Trash has no place among them. Inside the hall, one of the demons thinks of a way to make a good impression and decides to use our protagonist, believing he is weak. He tries to intimidate Gron, but Gron simply ignores the bastard, because the idiot has no idea what he is doing. Meanwhile, Clover's secretary steps forward, noting that this batch of recruits lacks discipline. Even so, Clover insists that everyone calm down so the evaluation can begin. He reveals a magic orb and explains that the evaluation measures two things. The first is the type of mark power, while the second is the level of that mark power. The orb is only meant to gauge their abilities and is not a complete representation of their combat strength. For example, if a fire mark user at mark level 3 fights a water mark user at mark level 6, it would still be difficult to determine the winner. In other words, they are searching for demons with potential, those willing to fight, struggle, and show absolute ruthlessness. With that said, a demon steps forward, and Clover tells him to place his hand on the orb. The result reveals that the demon possesses an electric mark at mark level 1. Nervously, the demon wonders if he has made the cut, but in the very next moment, Clover kills him, calling him trash. Clover mocks his cowardly personality. The remaining demons immediately begin running after Clover tells anyone who knows they cannot pass to willingly get lost. Those desperate enough to flee are cut down without mercy. Clover thinks to himself that since they have already admitted they are trash, it is best for them to die on the spot. Suddenly, one of the walls begins showing signs of collapse. Moments later, it shatters, and something grotesque and monstrous emerges from the opening. Even our protagonist is shocked by what he is seeing. Meanwhile, Clover's secretary identifies the creature as one of the great demon's favorite consorts, implying there are others like it. Following Clover's orders, the guards carefully escort the great demon's favorite consort back to the next room, making sure not to injure it. As the guards lead it away, Gron's eyes suddenly widen. He notices a familiar red scarf. It is the very same red scarf worn by the woman who had been held captive alongside the men from the Conquest King's court. The moment Gron recognizes it, his expression darkens with rage. When Clover insists they continue the test, he calls forward the demon who had been showing off earlier. However, the demon immediately folds and starts making excuses. Without saying much, Gron simply shoves the coward aside, noting that he is in a hurry. Before stepping forward, Gron asks what the requirements are for passing the evaluation. Meanwhile, the cowardly demon decides to use the distraction to escape while everyone else is focused on Gron. Clover eventually grows impatient with Gron's endless questions. Finally, Gron asks whether the examiner himself is strong enough, completely unaware of what our protagonist is planning. Clover proudly confirms that he has reached the third mark, which is exactly why he is qualified to serve as an examiner. After saying that, he warns Gron that if he is only stalling for time, he cannot guarantee him a quick death. In response, Gron suddenly grabs Clover by the tongue. In one swift motion, he drives the edge of the blade through the tongue, pinning Clover to the table. Next, he grabs the testing orb, which begins glowing brightly. Clover is stunned to discover that our protagonist has also reached the third mark. Gron says nothing instead. He swings the orb straight into Clover's head. Not once does he stop. Again and again, our protagonist repeatedly smashes Clover's head with the orb without mercy. The brutal beating continues until the demons watching, especially the one who had tried to provoke him earlier, are completely terrified. Once he is finished and Clover's corpse is no longer recognizable, Gron casually places the orb back where it belongs. The secretary calmly announces that he has passed the test. After all, he has just demonstrated both exceptional talent and overwhelming ruthlessness. Later, the same demon leads the surviving recruits outside and shows them the tents where they will rest while waiting for inspection. As soon as Gron enters his tent, he pulls out a scroll. A few hours earlier, the scout had given it to him. The scout's innate ability allows him to duplicate items in real time. He explained that if Gron writes on the replicated scroll, the message will instantly appear on the original scroll, making it their method of communication. Back in the present, Gron writes that he has successfully infiltrated Mud Ox Town. Inside a hidden cave outside the town, his group waits patiently for his message. As expected, the words appear on the original scroll, and the scout immediately informs everyone. The message states that Gron has successfully infiltrated the town, but he still needs to accomplish two objectives. First, he wants to gather detailed information about the Great Demon. Second, he needs to find the perfect moment when the demon is alone so the entire group can swarm him and bring him down. Not long afterward, the inspection begins. The demon in charge specifically requests to see our protagonist, the outstanding recruit who managed to catch the Great Demon's attention. Clover's secretary leads the inspector to Gron's tent, explaining that he never even considered searching our protagonist before. With that, the inspector enters the tent. Gron remains completely cooperative, calmly allowing them to come inside and search him. After the search, the demon finds nothing suspicious. Gron is cleared, and the demon orders him to follow him alone to meet Ji Hua. Meanwhile, Gron reveals that moments earlier, he managed to hide the scroll inside his body and used healing magic to heal the injury. They arrive at what appears to be a church building. Inside, the inspector tells the Great Demon that he has brought our protagonist. After the inspector leaves, Gron watches the Great Demon and wonders if this is what he uses his arm for. For a demon, Ji Hua seems surprisingly skilled at playing the piano. He continues playing a human melody, but by accident, he hits the wrong note. Once he is done, he turns to face Gron. He tells Gron not to mind him, because he only plays to suppress his killing desire. I guess that can be called music therapy. He approaches Gron, noting that it is just an interview and that he wants to know if Gron has any questions about his army. However, Gron is more interested in why Ji Hua wants to suppress his killing desire. Ji Hua finds the question interesting but admits that he does so because he does not want to be a demon. Gron also finds that interesting because demons are naturally tools of destruction and are literally born to kill. The two continue discussing while, in the background, a man is executed for disobeying the Great Demon. Ji Hua explains to Gron that he wants to be free. Since Gron plays along, Ji Hua tells our protagonist that it is time for him to answer his own question. His first question is about the music, and Gron admits he has no clue. This causes Ji Hua to slam him into the ground, cracking the floor. It turns out he intentionally hit the wrong note, and our protagonist flinched when he did, so he gives him one more chance to come clean. Gron does not give a direct response. In the end, the demon lets him go because he does not sense Gron's heartbeat fluctuate, meaning he believes Gron is telling the truth. Anyway, he admits that demons are slaves to their killing instincts, but he wants to break those chains just like a classic villain trying to make his ambitions sound noble, so he finds Gron's way of thinking pathetic. Our protagonist counters by pointing out that Ji Hua is building an army, which means he still needs slaves and demons to obey his commands. This causes the demon to ask why he wants to join his army. Obviously, Gron wants to kill him and take his arm. Instead, he tells Ji Hua that only by his side can he satisfy his urge to kill. This causes the Great Demon to picture him as the perfect loyal dog. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted, and Gron turns to see who has entered. A red-haired girl runs in, carrying something she made while calling the Great Demon her father. She happily shows him what she made as our protagonist watches from the side. The girl explains that she could not bear to pick the flowers, so she waited patiently for them to fall before picking them. In response, she receives a hard slap across the face. Gron watches the Great Demon assault the girl as he furiously asks if she is deaf. He wonders why she cannot follow such simple instructions, noting that humans are harder to train than wild dogs. Grabbing the red-haired girl by her slave collar, he warns her never to call him father again. He reminds her that she is nothing more than a slave. Just then, one of his subordinates rushes in, reporting that the evil dragon is approaching from the east. In response, Ji Hua tosses the girl aside while commenting that he has been waiting to encounter the evil dragon. Before leaving, he tells Shayna to head back to the basement on her own. He then orders his subordinate to take Gron to the camp, noting that he is impressed by him. Gron follows the demon from behind. At the same time, he secretly keeps tabs on Shayna. Meanwhile, Maravech reveals that he only came here for show, but he also needs to confirm the whereabouts of the princess and our protagonist. Otherwise, reporting back to the old man will be difficult. Unbeknownst to him, Ji Hua is patiently waiting for him at the clock tower. The moment Maravech enters his range, Ji Hua uses Gron's arm, gathering all of its strength to throw a rock. Maravech also senses the sudden fluctuation in energy. The Great Demon launches the rock at him. Maravech manages to dodge the projectile just in time. The impact of the rock is astonishing, effortlessly splitting apart the storm clouds. Unsurprisingly, Gron sees this and thinks to himself that he needs his power back. Meanwhile, the Great Demon's subordinate believes they have scared off the evil dragon, but Ji Hua calls the idiot out and orders him to make sure the sentries keep their eyes peeled. The next scene shifts outside where the same demon relays the order to the sentries while Gron watches, impressed by the Great Demon's sentry network and message system. The moment he thinks about using it to his advantage, the scene cuts to two demons walking. One of them complains about being pricked by thorns, not realizing it is Gron's doing. Gron uses this opportunity to map out their route. With the great demon's level of leadership, he is certain multiple patrol routes have been established. In other words, he needs to monitor them for several days. He thinks about this while sending a message to his comrades. However, he gets distracted by one of Sheena's flowers. Speaking of her, she is currently locked inside a basement. Gron finds her and calls the flowers, linking flowers, while handing some to her. She rushes forward excitedly, thanking him. She keeps talking about wanting to impress her father, while our protagonist is surprised that the door is not even locked since she casually opens it. Nonetheless, he wants to know why she keeps referring to the great demon as her father. Shenna replies with the brightest smile, saying he is the kindest person she knows. She continues talking, and our protagonist becomes convinced that the girl has a few screws loose. So when he points out how badly she is being mistreated, she simply shrugs it off as if nothing is wrong, compared to someone called Lord Barnier and the suffering she endured under him. She believes the great demon is a saint. Grun realizes her mind is completely distorted. She is being treated like a slave and does not even know it. So he suggests that she go outside, experience the world, and perhaps find something interesting. That immediately catches her attention. Our protagonist notes to himself that she needs someone to watch over her and correct her warped perception, but unfortunately he cannot think of anyone. Seeing him deep in thought, Shenna comments that he is very knowledgeable. She explains that her father does not want her making friends, so she hopes our protagonist can teach her new things in the future. Unfortunately, our protagonist has other priorities, such as learning more about the great demon. Still, he promises to return so they can have a longer conversation. After he leaves, Shanna notices that her rope has become loose. Since her father hates that, she removes her slave collar and tightens the rope around it instead. Shockingly, the girl possesses the same corpse innate ability as our protagonist. In the next scene, Merovec returns to the old man and reports everything he discovered. After hearing how Merovec almost got killed by the great demon, the old man immediately decides to head over there for a talk. As he says this, he activates an ability that allows him to move through shadows. Meanwhile, inside Jiwa's quarters, our protagonist is busy spying on him. He notices the demon using a seal power detector, a small barrier that, as its name suggests, detects the seal power of others. However, our protagonist easily bypasses it. With his level of mastery, concealing his mark power through compression is nothing more than child's play. Suddenly, the great demon senses someone's presence and asks whether they need an invitation to come in. The old man slowly emerges from the shadows. He remarks that the great demon is the most hideous demon he has ever seen, meaning he must be the leader. In response to the jab, Jiwa points out that the man is a human who has just entered demon territory, and no one needs to explain what could happen to him. Our protagonist listens to their conversation and realizes the two already know each other. That is why the great demon calls the old man an old fossil, noting that he has no manners. That strikes a nerve, prompting the old man to ask if Jiwa thinks he can defeat him in a fight. Before things escalate, a voice suddenly speaks from the old man's lantern, calming the situation and calling him Simon. Simon then asks his boss to step in and get rid of the great demon. The great demon appears somewhat alarmed as he notes that the lantern is an ancient Dooley Republic treasure that allows people to travel through space. In response, Simon says the great demon is scared, but declares that it is already too late. However, the demon is simply joking because he has one of those lanterns as well, which is quite the coincidence. The same person speaking from Simon's lantern is then summoned from the great demon's lantern. The newcomer turns out to be a human, and he immediately orders both of his subordinates not to fight. Both men instantly recognize the newcomer as Boss Matthias. Gron never expected that the man trying to kidnap the princess and the one pulling the great demon's strings would turn out to be the same person. From Boss Matthias's conversation, Gron learns that the great demon is in charge of gathering troops. Meanwhile, Simon specializes in capturing hostages. If this were a game of chess, these two would be his rook and bishop. Simon agrees to cooperate because his boss's goal is to overthrow Emperor Hoya and seize the kingdom of Enia. Turning to the great demon, Boss Matthias's expression darkens after hearing that Jiwa placed a bounty on the 4 assassins. The demon explains that he did it so others could do his dirty work for him, but he becomes confused when Boss Matthias orders him to remove the bounty. When he tries to argue, Boss Matthias forces him to lower his head, reminding him of the day Jiwa was sold to him by his former master, Lord Barnier. To ensure his loyalty, his previous owner even gave Matthias a special gift along with the purchase. The demon silently agrees to obey, as long as he is guaranteed his freedom. Matthias casually brushes it off before pulling out an item. The moment he crushes it, the matching item implanted inside the demon's head will explode, instantly blowing off his head and ending his life. Even so, Boss Matthias promises to give him the item once he wins. With that settled, he tells Simon to continue searching. As for Jiwa, he orders him to head to the consort chamber because he has brought new consorts. After giving his orders, Boss Matthias successfully returns inside the lantern. Just since they work together, Simon insists that the great demon prepare a guest room for him. He agrees before leaving to attend to some business. Gron secretly tails him and follows him to a hidden chamber where he finds the demon attending to one of his consorts. Through the lantern, Boss Matthias can see that she is about to give birth. Instead of a child, the consort lays a strange egg. Suddenly, a demon emerges from inside the egg. Shockingly, there are many of them. Boss Matthias is overjoyed. It turns out he has discovered a way to create human-demon hybrids, and every one of these demons possesses at least a second mark. Not only that, but they are extremely loyal to the late Demon Emperor. All Boss Matthias has to do is pose as the Demon Emperor's second-in-command to control them. As for the eggs that fail to hatch into demons, he tells Jiwa to dispose of them. The two begin discussing art, but Jiwa admits he has no idea what his boss is talking about. Meanwhile, Boss Matthias waits inside his mansion, commenting that the demon has no romantic soul, which is why he does not understand. Not long afterward, a group of people enters the mansion. From their conversation, they turn out to be orphans and girls from the streets. While some are excited to meet the noble taking them in, others remain skeptical. Out of nowhere, Matthias suddenly appears before one of them, acting like a perfect gentleman. After confirming that the girls believe he will be responsible for them and provide them with a home, the group becomes overjoyed. Even the girl who was skeptical moments earlier begins praising his handsome appearance and noble demeanor. She even goes as far as suggesting she become his personal maid. Maintaining his charming smile, Matthias asks everyone to gather together for a moment. Once they are all assembled, he activates his innate ability, Flesh Art, and fuses them into a single being. That is how the consorts are created. Afterward, he immediately transports them to the Great Demon's secret chamber. He tells the Great Demon to take care of everything, adding that he must not be disturbed because he has a ball to attend. Once the demons leave, Gron appears and immediately casts healing magic. However, the spell has no effect, leaving him confused. He soon realizes why. The girls are not injured at all. Boss Matthias has simply fused them into one body. Just then, Gron hears approaching footsteps. He quickly hides as the Great Demon enters with Shayna. Immediately, he tells her to remove her collar so he can check the number of marks on her neck. He also warns her to make sure that no one, especially Boss Matthias, ever sees them. She agrees. Meanwhile, our protagonist is left stunned. From everything he knows, the Mountain of Corpses is not a true innate ability. That is why it makes no sense for anyone besides him to possess it. Anyway, Shenna ignores the Great Demon's lecture and instead places the flower crown she made for him on his head. Seeing him remain silent, she mistakes it for happiness and promises to stay by his side forever. It is hard to tell whether the demon is touched or simply fed up. Either way, he kicks her away and orders her to get back to work and increase her marks. Just like that, she begins killing all the demons that failed to hatch. She continues until the marks completely surround her neck. Our protagonist watches, already anticipating what will happen next. The Mountain of Corpses authority, Day of Bliss, activates automatically. In an instant, a dark entity bursts out from Shenna's back. This is when our protagonist reveals why the Mountain of Corpses is not considered a true innate ability in the first place. It is actually the symptom of a parasite created by a dark creature. That creature feeds on slaughter and death, growing inside its host until the day it finally breaks free from its cocoon. The Day of Bliss is the moment that usually happens. Normally, only a Skyward Wedge can suppress it. However, the Great Demon is able to force it back inside, remembering Lord Barnier's instructions. Seeing such a brutal method, our protagonist silently expresses his concern. Before leaving the secret chamber in his snake form, he realizes just how much more difficult his plan to take the Great Demon's arm has become. If he wants any chance of winning, he must separate Shayna from the Great Demon. At the same time, his dark inner demon wonders if that means he wants to save her, since killing her would be far more beneficial. In response, Gron admits that he wants to prevent her from becoming someone like him. In the next chapter, our protagonist passes this message to Faye and the rest of the group. Faye hands the scroll to the princess while remembering they originally came to the Demon Lands to take our protagonist's arm and earn merit, which the princess acknowledges with a nod. Since that is the case, Faye decides to help the group by writing a message that Yvette's father will understand. She hands it to the princess, and she and her party immediately thank her because they will definitely be rewarded for this. Liro and the little healer even begin dreaming about what they will do with the reward. That leads Faye to tease them, saying it is usually bad luck when people start talking about everything they will do after returning because they often never make it back alive. Of course, the group falls for it. Faye simply laughs, finding their reactions very amusing. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Matthias, who is playing chess all by himself. He reflects on his plans and believes everything is going well so far. The only thing that seems like a problem is the kidnapping of the princess. Although he admits Simon is an idiot, he trusts the evil dragon to complete the task. Not to mention, his ally, who is assumed to be Lord Barnier since he bought both our protagonist's arm and Jiwa from him, has gone into hiding, forcing Matthias to rely on someone else. Before learning who that person is, the scene takes us back 1 year to the ruins of White Road City. Matthias and his concerned companion Simon walk through the ruined streets to meet Demon Lord Shu, while Matthias constantly reassures him. However, something on the ground makes him stop for a moment. Just then the man, or rather, the demon of the hour, appears and asks Matthias to hand him the orb lying on the ground. Matthias picks it up and gets straight to the point. He offers to heal Demon Lord Shu, using his skin innate skill while secretly signaling Simon that the two of them will run if anything goes wrong. Demon Lord Shu was injured during the battle with our protagonist at sea, and the only way to completely heal the curse is by attaching Gron's arm to his body. However, the demon immediately rejects the idea because of a personal grudge. The abrupt reply catches Matthias slightly off guard. Even so, he offers to find Demon Lord Shu a new limb in exchange for a favor. Back in the present, Matthias plays with a chess piece, while thinking that everything happening now is only possible because of the soft-hearted emperor. Back then, for some reason, Emperor Hoya did not want any more bloodshed. As a result, the remaining members of the old nobility were spared and allowed to continue ruling their fiefdoms. Of course, Matthias decides to take full advantage of the emperor's mercy to bring about his downfall, proving the saying that the true demons are humans themselves. The next scene takes us to the great demon's basement, where Shayna is drawing something on the wall. She happily expresses her joy that our protagonist actually came back as promised. Meanwhile, Gron observes what she is drawing. It is obviously a picture of a family. He can tell one figure is meant to be the great demon, but he has no idea who the other person is. His attention is snapped back to Shayna as she reminds him that he promised to tell her something interesting. That prompts Gron to tell her a story about White Road City. She admits she overheard Jiwa and the others talking about it as the greatest and richest city that ever existed. Gron nods and decides to tell her the story of someone who once lived in that city. The story begins over 30 years ago. Our protagonist notes that it was raining on the day he was born. He was born a commoner, and his parents lived in the slums from his childhood memories. His mother's hands were always stained blue, most likely from dyeing clothes. His father probably worked around furnaces because he constantly coughed. Ever since Gron was born, he had never spoken a single word. When people claimed he was mute and a burden, his father naturally defended him. However, that is not even the worst part, because a conversation between two men reveals that the city is about to raise taxes and introduce a war tax due to the ongoing battle against the rebel army. Naturally, this is terrible news for people living in their situation, but the couple believes they will somehow make it through. All they have to do is take things one step at a time. Seeing their son looking excited, his father hands him a few copper coins and tells him to buy the cheapest bread he can find. Our protagonist does exactly that, and is heading back through an alley when something makes him stop in the middle of his steps. He sees a boy playing all by himself with the very same orb from earlier. The boy casually mentions that he ran away from home and bets his father has not even noticed yet. From the boy's clothes alone, anyone can tell he does not belong there. Just then, Gron's stomach lets out a loud growl. He notices the boy's stomach making the exact same sound, while the boy thinks Gron is annoying because he has been standing there silently, without saying a single word. In response, little Gron quietly offers him a piece of his bread. The rich kid gladly accepts the bread, and Gron simply turns around and leaves. Not long after, he is cornered by two thugs who demand that he hand over all his money. Suddenly, the rich kid appears and steps in front of our protagonist. From his clothes, the men can immediately tell he is a noble, but they tell him to step aside because life in the slums is all about the survival of the fittest. The kid scoffs at those words. His father has always taught him to protect the weak, because the weak are the true pride of humanity. According to him, that is the very foundation of civilization. However, the thugs are not interested in hearing a lecture about civilization. Instead, they draw their weapons. In response, the boy activates his innate ability and summons a warrior straight out of solo leveling. Naturally, the men have no desire to find out what happens next. They immediately turn around and run for their lives. Of course, Gron cannot speak. He is about to express his gratitude by kneeling, but the boy quickly stops him, saying there is no need. Besides, he has already received Gron's token of appreciation, the piece of bread, and just like that, the two boys become close friends. As time passes, their friendship grows even stronger. Gron especially remembers one particular day when someone is publicly executed. By pure coincidence, he and his friend happen to be there. It turns out Gron had wanted his friend to witness it. The man being hanged is a criminal accused of multiple counts of theft. Watching the execution, our protagonist's friend feels sick to his stomach. Later, he tells Gron that they should never go near another execution again. As they walk away, he quietly reflects on what he has seen and concludes that the current laws are far too cruel. Like any ordinary person, he decides that once he gains power, he will change them. Time passes, and after another day of playing together, his friend heads home, hoping to see Gron again the following day. In the background, two people discuss the latest rumor that some merchants have secretly been supplying goods to the Aenian rebel forces. Meanwhile, Gron's friend finally arrives home, where his butler immediately informs him that his father wishes to see him. His father wastes no time scolding him, expressing his disappointment that his own son spends his days playing instead of taking his studies seriously. It turns out the man is the chief justice of the city. He orders his son not to leave the house until he has memorized the 3rd volume of the law within a week. With that, he leaves to attend a meeting of the nobles after being summoned. At the same time, Gron is returning home. Suddenly, a group of soldiers violently shove him aside. He watches in horror as his parents are arrested, accused of secretly selling goods to the Aenian rebels. Gron desperately tries to stop them, but there is nothing he can do. He can only watch helplessly as both of his parents are taken away to be detained. At the same time, the nobles gather to discuss the growing problem of citizens colluding with the Aenian rebels. They suggest using the incident to set an example for the rest of the city. Considering the unrest spreading throughout the city and everything else happening, they wait for the Chief Justice to make the final decision. He silently considers everyone's arguments, After what feels like a long time, he finally reaches his verdict. He declares that they absolutely cannot allow what is happening in the kingdom of Enya to happen in their own nation. In the end, they all agree that it is better to sacrifice 1,000 innocent people than risk allowing a single criminal to go free by mistake. Unfortunately, Gron's parents happen to be among those innocent sacrifices. Watching both of his parents struggle, Gron desperately does everything he can to support them. Gron is obviously struggling to help his parents. Seeing this, the executioner tries to stop him, but a soldier insists he wait. The two soldiers decide to have some fun and make a wager to see how long Gron will last, while the executioner feels helpless after hearing that. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, our protagonist's friend is stuck in the library. He begins to have a bad premonition because the rain suddenly starts falling harder. Because of this, he ignores his butler, who suggests he continue with his studies. However, the moment he opens the door to head out, he is greeted by his old man. His father immediately tells him to get back inside. Meanwhile, the entire time, Gron is still holding on. Seeing their child struggle, his parents insist it is fine and tell him to let go. However, the boy is more stubborn than your Wi-Fi when you desperately need it. Unfortunately, his legs are starting to go numb. Eventually, his legs give out, leading to the immediate death of his parents. This causes one of the soldiers to sigh in irritation, calling our protagonist trash. He tells Gron that if he had just lasted a little longer, he wouldn't have lost the wager. Unbeknownst to the fool, something just snaps inside the poor kid. So when Gron grabs him by the hand, the soldier becomes annoyed that a filthy commoner dares to touch him. Meanwhile, Gron's strength steadily increases, and the fool is unable to free himself, forcing him to tell our protagonist to let go. In response, our protagonist goes for the kill, and his first words are literally him screaming, "Die." The rest of the soldiers immediately spring into action. Our protagonist picks up the soldier's sword as a knight charges forward. The knight brings down his hammer and our protagonist is struck, coughing up blood. He is also sent flying. The archers immediately start firing. Gron is forced to drag himself up and retreat while suffering 2 arrows in the process. Seeing him run into an alley, the soldiers immediately follow him. In the end, they decide to split up to search for him more quickly. Meanwhile, Gron manages to lose them, and the adrenaline is starting to fade. Just then, he comes across a man suffering from malnutrition who is begging to be freed. At that moment, Gron hears a voice inside his head telling him to help the man. His inner demon even uses every bit of reason to convince him that he is doing the right thing. However, Gron tries to resist, causing the dark entity to wonder why he is refusing. It explains that it isn't the one controlling his movements, meaning our protagonist is moving to kill the man of his own free will despite trying to resist. The voice begins striking at our protagonist's weak spot, pointing out that he has an opportunity most commoners will never get. It reminds Gron that he was born during rain like this. In other words, this is his calling, so he shouldn't hesitate any longer because now he will have the power to do whatever he wants and destroy whatever stands in his way. That also includes gaining the strength he could have used to hold the rope and save his parents. And this is how villains are born. Not long after, an unfortunate soldier stumbles upon a corpse, only to realize it has been strangled to death. Approaching the corner cautiously, he pulls out his sword, but in the very next moment, he is horrified. That's because our protagonist has single-handedly wiped out the entire residence, sending a cold chill down his spine. Then Gron suddenly appears behind him and everyone already knows the poor guy is cooked.